очі палає вже 100-й раз, незмінно немов наказ триматись. Тіло не хоче, втомилося за цей час, але серед вічних фраз не здатись. Це все може бути з тобою, якщо віддаєшся сповна, як просто стати героєм в країні, де йде війна, як просто стати героєм в країні, де йде війна.
Продовжуйте наступ, закріпляйтеся на блокпосту.
Сон тільки сниться, а вибухи наяву. Допоки я ще живу, я дію. Кров струмениться, окроплюючи траву. Не в фільмі, а наяву події. Це все може бути з тобою, якщо віддаєшся сповна, як просто стати героєм в країні, де йде війна, як просто стати героєм в країні, де йде війна.
Є гранати? Є. Граната! Подарунок!
Небо вітає, і поряд мій побратим. Ми бачимо сизий дим під нами. Наші тримають, а тут ворогів нема. Тут вічність нас обійма, як мама. Це все може бути з тобою, якщо віддаєшся сповна, як просто стати героєм в країні, де йде війна. Не просто бути героєм в країні, де йде війна.
Не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни, та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлекуйло, то для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home, бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чутно кличе дітей нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел
часто змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, співпрацюєте.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лафтем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
Великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to day 119 of the news, and it is good to see you all once again.
And once again, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine here on day 119, and while we don't have massive news about Ukrainian breakthroughs or Russian pushback or anything like that, we do have news that is showing the Ukrainians getting some successes in other forms today, and also some very bad news for the Russians in the southern front as the garbage has finally arrived, like the title and the thumbnail suggests. We'll be covering that later on in the stream, but I assure y'all, if y'all stay around to that point, it is a sad embarrassment on how they tried to make these old tanks look modern, or make them seem modern. But with that, of course, just a quick little note, we managed, and I forgot to say this last night, we managed to raise $350,000 in support for Ukraine with last Sunday's fundraiser being concluded. Last Sunday's fundraiser raised almost another $13,000, which bumped up our total from $314,000-ish up just that little bit extra to get us to $330,000, which is almost exactly 1/3 of $1 million. Our channel has managed to do something that no one ever believed. Me or Matthew never really believed that this would be possible, but we've now made it to this point, and hopefully we can make it even higher, or the war can end before we can get to a very high amount. I hope, honestly, that it's the latter rather than the former, because I would rather the war end and let the suffering be over and let Ukraine start rebuilding, and maybe we could run some fundraisers for that. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But anyways, with that, I just wanted to congratulate the Lee Spring Army once again for the outstanding work, and I just saw some people say that I may have said that yesterday, and I think I did, but it wasn't the first thing in the stream, and I wanted to make sure to give you all the credit, just in case if some of you all didn't hear this yesterday. And so thank you all once again for being huge supporters of Ukraine, and also helping these fundraisers to get to unbelievable heights. And so with that, we're now going to be going over tonight's schedule for the news, and we have a lot of it, spanning from Ukraine to the eastern seaboard of the United States. Starting off, we'll be, of course, covering the news in the location... Wait a minute, no, correction. We'll be covering the news from Finland to Russia, and that's right, we're going to be covering a little bit of international news today at the start, and we're going to start at Finland and then move our way down towards Dagestan, which is in the southern part of Russia near the Caucasus Mountain Range down here. After we do that, we're then going to move back into Ukraine to cover our location unknowns, which we have about 12 of them today. After we cover those location unknowns, we're then going to move on into the Kharkiv region and cover the Kharkiv and northern Donbass news. But before we actually get there, we're of course going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those questions, we'll then move on to the Kharkiv area and the northern Donbass and cover the news there. After we do that, we're once again going to move out of the Kharkiv and northern Donbass area and move down to the southern front, which we actually have no news in Donetsk today, which is an interesting occurrence, but we're going to move into the southern front near Kherson and also Zaporizhia and cover all of the news that we've gotten there, which is actually a sizable amount. But before we get there, we're of course going to take a pause while we go and move over Donetsk, and we're going to answer another 3 questions from the chat. And so after we do that, we'll then be moving on to the southern front, like I just said, and then finally out of Ukraine and across the sea to the United States, where we've gotten 2 bits of news today that are kind of big, and one of them does touch on sending guns to Ukraine that are privately owned. And so I'll let y'all know a lot about that right at the end of the stream when we get to the international news, but without further ado, let's get to the first bit of news we've gotten today, which is from Finland. As some of y'all may know, Finland came under the gun pretty early in the war, as the Finnish, along with the Swedish, which we colloquially call here on the stream Swedeland, considering that they're both in a similar situation trying to get into NATO, Finland was put under the gun by the Russians as the Russians built up a small military force on their border and said that they would not be able to join NATO as well. This, of course, panicked the Finns to a reasonable degree. It wasn't a massive reaction, but you could tell that they were getting alarmed by this response. So, today we actually heard that the Chief of Staff of the Finnish Armed Forces says that Finland is ready to go to war, much like Ukraine has, if the Russians were to push over into their borders and begin a war themselves. This Twitter post just confirms that. It's from the Kyiv Independent, which we will click on it real quick just to show y'all. We can see here, by the Kyiv Independent, the Finnish defense chief said today that Finland is ready to fight if Russia attacked. And as we know historically, based off of the Finnish Winter War, where the Soviet Union and the Finns went at it against each other, the Finns have a pretty good capability of defending themselves, even when outnumbered, and even when under-equipped compared to what they're facing. just like the Ukrainians are right now in the modern war. And so hopefully that kind of tradition has carried on into the modern day, and we'll hopefully see them, if they were to be invaded and not a part of NATO at that point, be able to defend their own country and hold the Russians back. Honestly, I don't think the Russians would ever be able to conduct a sizable offensive within Finland itself, because they're currently tied up with all of their logistical forces in Ukraine only. And so there would really be no way to supply an invasion force that would be going into Finland at the exact same time. So I don't think it's possible, and I think that the Finns are just getting ready for the worst, but I don't think the worst is going to come. But that's my opinion, and I could be wrong. That's just an assumption on my end based off of the information we've gotten from Ukraine, but, you know, that could be wrong. So with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front, and I have to show y'all this huge bit of news, and I don't know how this happened, where the drone came from, but this was massive. Inside of the Russian town of Novoshakhtinsk, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, I know I probably butchered it, but today we saw one of the craziest occurrences of this war. A Ukrainian drone, as far as we know, it was Ukrainian, took off from Ukrainian land, flew over the entire Donetsk or Luhansk Republic, either one, and into Russia, and then suicide attacked a petroleum factory and knocked it out. And before we even watched the video, this facility was knocked out. We do know that the fire was picked up on satellite images, and it appears to have gone out of control based off of that information. Going off of that, the whole entire refinery has most likely been shut down, and with it, an entire 1% of Russia's oil production has been knocked out for an undefinitive amount of time right now by a drone that cost around $20,000. And so the Ukrainians spent $20,000 to knock out 1% of Russia's national oil production. Anyways, here's a video that shows this drone flying over the facility and straight into the refinery. And let me just pop this up here, and y'all are in for a treat. This one's funny. So you can hear the drone coming in. You can see it up there.
Да, это беспилотник. Да блин, где ты там? Да нет, конечно. Не вижу.
And we can kind of see it, and now it's going into a dive. And the Russians here at the plant, they think it's a Russian drone right now. And so they're just sitting here joking around about it, and they're like, hey, isn't that kind of like diving a little low? And then they watch it do this. And just blow up into the refinery. And then one of them said, "Blyad," because they just realized that that wasn't a Russian drone, that was a Ukrainian drone, that it made it there and then kamikazed into the refinery. And so now someone's called over the radio saying, who's blowing up the factory, like this is a normal OSHA violation or something like that. He's just like, hey, who did this? And none of them realized it at this point, and I guess the Russian air defenses didn't pick up this drone the entire time it was in flight, but this thing is flown all the way from Ukraine to this oil refinery and then rammed into it and exploded. And now the fire is just burning out of control.
Такие дела. НПЗшку бахнули.
Oh my gosh. There wasn't anything these guys could have done even if they had realized it was a Ukrainian drone. It was up to the Russian air defenses to shoot this thing down until it got there. But the fact that it got that far, to the point that the Russians would never even believe that that was a Ukrainian drone, and then to watch it slam into a refinery like a Japanese Zero in World War II, is hilarious, honestly. And it shows a massive gap in Russia's air defenses that a drone could fly that far without being shot down.
Ну да, с той стороны прилетел.
And that's the end of the video, but that's got to be the most hilarious event that we've seen during this war, from the Russians just talking about it before it happened. They were literally sitting here like, hey, look, it's a Russian drone, isn't that neat? And then it starts flying at a steep angle towards the refinery, and they're like, huh, it's going into a dive. And then it blows up, and the plant manager calls over the radio, okay, who's blowing up the factory? Like it's just something that people normally do there. So I don't know if that's a regular occurrence for the factory personnel or the factory workers, but the Ukrainians did manage to take it out, and it looks like it may be out for some while. I'm sure they'll be able to repair it eventually, maybe within a week or two, and have it back up and running, that specific area. But based off of that fire, that's a little bit of a question. They will eventually get it running though, but for now, an entire 1% of Russia's oil production was knocked out by a $29,000 drone, which is hilarious to me, and it lets y'all know why drones are going to become the key to warfare. With $29,000, you too can cause irreparable damage to the Russian economy, and we're able to raise that on some of our higher end fundraisers. So just letting y'all know, with a single fundraiser like that, we can actually knock out a massive amount of Russia's infrastructure in terms of its oil production. But anyways, moving off of that, I desist. We're now going to move on to Dagestan. And I'm saying Dagestan, I'm sure that someone's about to say it's Dagestan or something like that. I've heard Dagestan. I watch Bald and Bankrupt, and that's how he pronounces it, and he can actually speak Russian, so I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Dagestan. But anyways, we can see that the farmers down here, well, really the sheep herders, were apparently trying to show their patriotism to the current war through some symbolism. But it turns out in the end, they made a perfect reflection on what the Russian public is like. And so, here y'all have it. Here are some Z's painting onto the sides of sheep, and you can't make this stuff up. Anyways, here's the video. I can't play the music, of course, but oh gosh, I know what they were trying to do here. This would be like painting the stars and stripes on the side of a sheep, but the Z just doesn't have the same effect. And I feel like, honestly, they may be trying to imitate the Serta sheep, if y'all know what I'm talking about. Serta sheep. Let me pull that up, just for some of my international viewers who may not have the Serta brand, well, the Serta brand in there. And let me back out. Serta, come on, images. All right, there we go. I feel like this is what they were going for, really? But it came off really bad. It looks like, you know, of course, they're just trying to paint out all of these sheep as the people of Russia, and they all just voluntarily took the Z, and they're just walking around with it. So, of course, pretty funny to see, and a pretty ironic thing that they tried to do. In their attempt to be patriotic, they pretty much have portrayed the Russian social situation at the moment. But with that, hope y'all have enjoyed the Serta sheep. And with that, we're also, by the way, I think this is what Vladimir Putin looks like about right now. Actually, that looks a lot like Vladimir Putin. Hang on. Let's get a side-by-side comparison here if we can. All right. This versus that. Very similar comparison right there. But anyways, we're going to move on from that. I'm not going to harp on that too long. Just a very weird coincidence. But with that, we're now going to move out of Russia, and we're now going to move into Ukraine and cover the location unknowns, which we actually have a pretty decent amount of today. And of course, we had a great lead into it with the international news and the Russian news as well. Starting off with our first bit of location unknown news, we've seen an R-18 drone, the Octocopter, hitting a Russian BMP again. Of course, these very cheap drones are causing millions of dollars in damage. We can see it dropping a bomblet there, straight onto that BMP. We can already see a Russian crewman running off from the APC, and it's been blown up, and the crew member is still running away. We can now see the drone adjusting to drop the next bomblet more on target. And we can now see the next bomblet falling, and this time it looks like it's going to fall straight on the turret, and boom shakalaka, it looks like that one hit dead onto the tank, and it looks like it's going to start burning up. We can now see the drone flying off. It just gets me. There's no drama to the drone footage once something happens. It's just that they turn the drone and just start flying off. And it's like a normal day at the office almost. There's nothing exciting about how they fly away. It's just the camera looking at the ground as it just starts to slowly float away. But that was another BMP destroyed on film, and I would like to give a little bit of a story about this group here that you see this icon up in the top left corner of the screen called Enerhodar, I believe. This little group is actually not made up of the Ukrainian military whatsoever. These are private citizens like bankers, teachers, school children, teenagers, anyone who has experience with drones, and they fly their own group of drones and make their own improvised explosives. And they themselves, civilians, are making an impact in this war with their own drones by dropping these munitions onto Russian vehicles and destroying them themselves. And so this isn't even official Ukrainian military activity. These are the citizens of Ukraine pretty much committing, I guess you could say, partisan attacks, I guess cyber partisan attacks in a way, against Russian forces through their drones. And I don't think that story's ever been explained here on this channel, but I feel like a massive credit has to be given to the Ukrainian civilians who are flying these drones day and night to try and stop the Russian invasion the best they can as well. And huge credit to all of the people of Ukraine who have been working around the clock, just like this drone unit, to continue on the struggle, and hopefully they will win in the end. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we're going to see a close call for a Russian soldier. And when I say close, it was close. Now, much like a normal Russian, he does have a little hidey hole to pop into, and we can see him bringing probably a load of loot with him to his hidey hole. Now, the drone just dropped the bomblet. The bomblet then explodes. He flings all of his stuff down to the ground and goes running into the hole like, I don't know. I mean, I have a lot that I can say about that, but we'll refrain from that statement. Now we can see it looping again, and let's watch his reaction time. So right now, he's sorting out his loot. It looks like he may have actually seen the drone for a second. Look, he looked straight up at it. Yeah, he saw it. But he was sitting there thinking, they're not going to drop the bomb on me. And then the Ukrainian drone operator said, well, watch me. And then dropped it. And then it blew up. That freaked him out. And then he went scurrying for the hole. I would say that got the message across. And hopefully the drone can drop a second bomblet, if it has one, onto the stuff he was bringing with him, because I'm sure that would be a huge disappointment that all of those backpacks filled with whatever they have in them is now turned to vapor. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the death of some Russian vehicles. And I'll have to mute this one, and here we go. This does not appear to be Stugna footage. This actually appears to be footage from some kind of a scope or an observation point. As we can see a little crosshair here, but we can see the two vehicles out in the distance at the start of the film moving, and then we can see the first one get hit. Now we're going to see them come to a dead stop in the field here, as you can see out there, and you can see some of the crew members, well actually 2 of them are already running away, but it appears that 3 of them are sitting by the tank in the rear right side of this group, and they're trying to figure out what happened. Now we can see them running back, and now we can see them all running away. And the 2 tanks are just sitting there. It looks like they were trying to tow one. Now that one that was being towed, it seems, is no longer going to be towable. I don't think the insurance is going to cover that. But the Russian crew ran off and left their tanks to be destroyed. Great footage to see, and hopefully they were able to knock out both of them. It looks like they did get a disabling hit on the first one, but it was really hard to tell if it was destroyed because we never saw it brew up. So at this point, we're not really sure if the first one on the left side of the screen was destroyed or damaged, but we do know that apparently it was hit well enough that the crew abandoned that tank as well as the one that was being towed. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see soldiers under fire while on the road. These are Ukrainian soldiers. Luckily, none of them got hurt, but it was a very close call for them. And so, here's the video. We can hear the rounds coming in right around them. They're now going to hop out of the vehicle and run for cover. We now see them laying down on the ground. And we can hear the mortar rounds, or whatever kind of shells these are, coming in incredibly close. Great to see that they, of course, avoided getting hurt, but those shells were incredibly close. A very close call for them, and luckily they'll live to fight another day, and hopefully live throughout the entirety of the war and manage to get on home. That's what I'm hoping for every single time I see a video like this, but I'm sure this is very harrowing and very stressful for the Ukrainians in that film that were caught up in that whole entire mortar barrage, and that's what I'm assuming it most likely was. It sounded to be smaller caliber, and so it's most likely some kind of a medium or a heavy mortar. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian soldiers speaking German for the fun. But I don't understand why he was speaking German. I think it was some kind of joke about, like the Germans being you-know-who, but I can't really tell you for certain. But anyways, I'm going to play the video, because even if you can't understand Ukrainian or German, it's just a funny video to watch. And so, here it is. So we can see him walking.
Гвинтокрил!
Кажи поляница.
Поляница, не бей меня! Съел там поляница!
Sieht heißt, wie sie auch sehr deutsch, ich liebe Yacht, ich
Ja,
natürlich.
You hear the guy, I hope y'all hear that guy in the background who's going, yeah, yeah. And if y'all don't know German, that means yes in German. But it's hilarious. They're both in on this joke. I don't know what's about, but if someone could translate for me in the live chat and let me know what they're saying, this seems to be a pretty funny little exchange. But anyways, I'm going to rewind it for a second so that way y'all can hear that yeah, yeah from the second
Wie
guy.
sie auch sehr deutsch, ich liebe Yacht, ich
ja,
natürlich.
ja, gut Position, schlossen.
But we can see they're having a good little bit of fun. I'm not really sure exactly what they were saying, but it is really cool to hear them joke around and have a good time, of course. And that's always important to do on the front lines and important for everyone to do in this war. Of course, wars are incredibly stressful and incredibly terrible things, but you always have to make sure, as the Monty Python Life of Brian movie would let you know, to look on the bright side of life and always have a little bit of a joke here and there so that way it doesn't really get to you. But of course, great to see them having a good bit of fun. And with that, we are now on to the next bit of Location Unknown news. Here we can see a short clip is around 25 seconds long of cockpit footage of a Ukrainian Su-25 flying around the planes, and it seems to be doing some pretty nice turns. So here's the footage. We see the guy having a pretty fun time. Also, he's taking some sharp left and right banks, and it looks like he may have popped some flares back there, so this may be near the front. It looks like his plane has mostly been stripped bare or dropped most of its munitions at this point, and all that it has left is the external drop tanks. I'm not really sure why this is the case, but this footage did come out today, and it was of a Ukrainian Su-25 pilot. So cool to see, of course, that the Ukrainian Su-25s are still airborne and still running, but rather than that, really cool video. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some more incredibly good-looking Ukrainian helicopter footage. Now, this was cool. This is what you would imagine riding in a helicopter to look like, and here they're flying over some kind of a small creek. This is most likely a river by European terms, and we can see them flying over. Really neat to see. Honestly, this is my favorite helicopter footage of the war so far. Oh, that's so cool. I would love to be flying in one of those helicopters and get that kind of view. That's the end of the video, but it was a great little bit of scenery as they flew over that creek. I'm going to call it a creek. I know it's probably a river, but it was really cool to see them fly over that creek and get that nice little scenery for a bit. And also, I would pay to be in the seat of that helicopter to get that kind of view while flying. With that, we're on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Stugna hitting a warehouse. A lot of y'all, if y'all have been watching the channel for a good long while, which most of you probably have, a lot of y'all know that the Stugnas have gone from anti-tank to really anti-everything as the wars continue to progress. And here in this instance, we get another example where a skiff, the export version with the Arabic interface on it, is being used to strike against a Russian warehouse. And so here's the video. We can see that something is already on fire. It looks like it may be an APC or the warehouse itself. I can't really tell for certain.
Треба їм які зараз покращити.
Now we can see it blowing up. Pretty decent bit.
Там такий гриб пішов.
Бачу.
Ти не бачив?
Зараз бачу.
Зараз вже нема.
We can now see a small little explosion, and I'm assuming that that is the warehouse. We don't see any of the buildings behind it blowing up or anything, so I'm assuming that that little thing was the warehouse they hit, and we could see it having some nice little explosions, letting us know that a Russian unit, most likely a BTG-sized unit, has lost its ammunition and is going to have that resupplied somehow, which will be putting strain on the Russian logistical forces, as that is something that they probably have not accounted for, or they don't have the ability to really account for. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can then see Ukrainian morale is low. I know that we just saw the Ukrainian soldiers joking around and laughing and stuff, but in all seriousness, I think this war is getting into a push comes to shove kind of situation, and the morale just keeps getting lower and lower, and it's really scaring me because if the morale keeps getting lower, they're not going to be joking anymore. We're just going to be seeing miserable Ukrainians. And so I really hate to be honest with y'all, but I'm just going to let y'all see the footage yourselves and let y'all make out what's what as we see this poor man having convulsions from the absolute sorrow and misery he's in. And so here's the video.
Затоптали трави, затоптали буйні трави, хлопці кучеряві.
Повертаються додому всі із гарбузами. Що ж ти робиш, Василину, з тими легенями? І співає верховина, дзвінко пісня лине. Василино, Василино, люба Василино, 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 файна Василино.
Із краси води не пити, знаю, добре знаю.
Та чомусь твоєї хати також не минаю. Посміхнися, озовися, верховинка люба. Стану я в твоєму серці сотим відлунням. І співає верховина, дзвінка пісня лине. Василино, Василино, люба Василино, 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 файна Василино.
And so now that the video's ended, I hate to say it, but these guys are just having the worst time ever, and it looks like the Russians are finally getting to them. They're going into convulsions. They're going into absolute fits. As the Russian propaganda told me, and I know the Russian propaganda is 100% true, it just is. I mean, these poor guys here have been taken over by some kind of Ukrainian bioweapon, and it's just making them convulse until they die. These guys are not happy at all, and it looks like they're having a terrible time on the front lines, and I just think this poor man right here, he's just had it. He's just taken over with fits of hysteria. So God bless the man. I hope that he gets that medical care that he rightfully deserves for his service to such a misguided cause, and it's terrible. But in all seriousness, of course, getting past the joke there, these guys, I haven't seen a video like this before of such a montage of recent little funny bits and giggles, I guess, the Ukrainians have been having, and it's great to see them having a fun time. And I did take a hit, and it was a little bit of a risk here. That music may have been copyrighted, but I felt like the context of this video would have been completely lost without the silly music, and so I had to make sure to unmute that, and if I do take the copyright hit, I just will. Also, one of the weight room songs is copyrighted. I found that out last night. So, anyways, the video was already going to be copyrighted. So, what's wrong with the second one, eh? But anyways, a very good video, and I had to show this to y'all because the Ukrainians, of course, still have incredibly high morale. And if the soldiers have high morale and they believe that what they're doing is good, then that means they are, in their minds, winning. And that's what matters. If the soldiers think they're winning, they can win. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we see that the Ukrainians have also become a chick magnet. Now, I know that y'all are seeing the title here on the screen, and y'all are thinking, the Ukrainians feeding chicks. What are they feeding them? Beer? You know, you don't feed chicks beer, you give them beer to drink. But I'm just going to let y'all see the chicks that the Ukrainians are pulling these days, and let y'all see what they're eating. And so, here's the video. Oh man, that was really cheesy. But anyways, here it is.
І горобці, бля. І не солоді. Це солоді.
Бля, на холодне, на.
Це ці... Ну, щоб горло не боліло.
You see the little chicks eating. I don't know what kind of chicks these are, but they're really cute. And when you see them enjoying some hamburger meat, it seems. It looks like someone just said poutine, and I think that may be poutine. But whatever these little chicks are eating, they're happy to gobble it down. And I love to see Ukrainian soldiers taking care of the animals that are just wandering around the front lines or anywhere that they're near. We usually don't see videos of the Russians doing that. We saw a few, but of course you could tell they're staged. But we just see these impromptu videos where the Ukrainians go over their way to take care of a dog or a cat, or just these little chicks right here. And so it's great to see that they're pulling chicks on the front lines. I'm sure that makes them happy because they're always missing the chicks back home. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a precious little puppy. Now, I know we've been kind of stocked up here with happy footage, but crazily enough, we just had a load of good stuff that came out today from the Ukrainians, funny stuff, sweet stuff, and now we got a little video of the Ukrainians taking a little puppy for their unit. And it is the cutest thing. You can already see it there in the video, and so I'm just going to let it play and let y'all see this precious little baby puppy.
Короче, сейчас покажу самого меншого побратима.
Oh, look at that thing. Now that is a precious little puppy.
Слава Украине.
And so that's the end of the video, but I just love that little dog. Now, that's got to be the cutest, sweetest little puppy that we've ever seen over the whole entire course of the war, and this guy right here gets the medal for picking up the cutest little puppy ever seen. So, great little video, sweet little one, and of course, a bit of a reprieve from the normal monotony of the war and the war news. With that, we're now on to our last bit of Location Unknown news. We haven't been able to get these numbers for quite some while here on this channel. I just haven't been able to grab them and put them on. But today I went out of my way to go and find the latest casualty statistics, and I finally found them, and the numbers are very shocking based off of the last time we saw them. Here's the latest report of Russian losses. We've seen that the Russians have lost an additional 300 troops, and I'd also like to note that this number isn't from today, it's from yesterday. This is the most recent figure I could find, but we can see that the Russians lost another 300 ground troops. They're now back up to losing the high numbers that they were losing at the very start of the war, and numbers that were comparable to how many soldiers the British were losing per day on average in World War II again. We can see that they also lost an additional 19 tanks on the 21st, bringing up that number near to 1,500, which we're assuming is close to 40 to 50% of Russia's actual operational tank force. We've seen that they've lost 3,606 armored personnel vehicles. That includes BTRs, Tiger armored cars, BMPs, the whole lot. That includes all of them, and we've seen them lose 3,606 of those vehicles. They've also lost 752 artillery systems. Those are like Mista Bs and D-20 howitzers. We've also seen them lose 239 MLRSs of all kinds. That includes Grads, Ergons, and Smerches. We've also seen them lose 98 anti-aircraft systems. None extra were destroyed yesterday. They've lost 216 planes. Just to put that figure into perspective, that is nearly the entire Su-27 force in the Russian Air Force. And just to put that number well into picture, Russian Air Force fighter aircraft numbers. Let's pull up the numbers that the Russian Air Force has, just to show off how bad the Russians are doing right now. 1 second, let me go and flip down to Wikipedia. So, here we go. We can see in the service, in the Russian military, all right? And this is what counts. The Russians have like several thousand airplanes, all right? But the thing is that a lot of them are not usable on the front lines. For example, 120 of them are Ilyushin 76s, and you're not going to be seeing these things dogfight, like a Su-27 or MiG-29 or anything. So, by and large, anything that's not an attack aircraft or a multi-role / fighter aircraft is out of the picture in terms of something that can be used in combat. So we can see that in total, the Russians have somewhere in between 87 to 240 MiG-29s in service right now. And these are the pre-war numbers. And so with 216 aircraft lost, that means that they could have lost the entirety of their MiG-29 force in the Russian Air Force, or they could have lost all of their Su-27s and almost all of their Su-30s at this point, completely wiped off the board. If you were to just take one single class of aircraft that the Russians use and just make them account for all of the casualties that they've taken so far. And so when you put this into perspective, in terms of combat aircraft lost, they have lost a sizable amount of their actual operational air wing. Now, of course, that's not taking into perspective the massive amount of attack aircraft that they have, both on Su-24s and Su-25s. But in terms of their multi-role / fighter aircraft, which is what the modern world has gone towards, they have lost an unbelievable figure. 216 planes. If y'all want to get an idea of how bad that is, let's type in coalition air losses in the Gulf War. Losses, Gulf War. And let's see if we can just get a quick figure. The coalition lost 52 fixed-wing aircraft over the entirety of the Gulf War, and the Russians, in 4 months of fighting Ukraine, have lost 216 aircraft. They've also lost 181 helicopters, and the coalition forces during the Gulf War lost around 26, as we just saw in that last tab. And so both in aircraft losses and helicopter losses, they are well ahead of any amount of air and helicopter losses that have been seen in any war in the late 20th century or the early 21st century, which we're in right now. We've seen the Russians, of course, have lost 14 boats / cutters. That also includes the Moskva. Great to know that that's one of the ships that was lost. And it, of course, was a $750 million ship. Nothing to just, overlook. That's a massive figure. We've also seen them lose 611 drones. 10 new drones were shot down just on the 21st. We've seen 59 special equipment vehicles get destroyed, an additional 4 yesterday, meaning that the Russians were most likely trying to construct something like a bridge, and the Ukrainians just wiped them out. We've also seen them lose 2,537 vehicles and fuel trucks, meaning that the Russians are getting near the 70% margin for the amount of supply vehicles that they have lost that they entered the war with. The Russians only have around 4,000 supply trucks that we know of. And so, losing 2,537 of them is getting around the 60% or over margin and getting close to the 70% area. Wonderful to know. And that lets us know that the Russians are very bad off in terms of supply, and they're most likely having to commandeer a large amount of civilian vehicles to make up for this behemoth amount of losses. And finally, we saw on the 21st alone, the Ukrainians were able to probably net their most successful day in shooting down Russian cruise missiles, as they netted an additional 7, bringing up the total to 137 cruise missiles that have been shot down. A great day for Ukraine on the 21st of June, and hopefully when the numbers come out for the 22nd of June, which is today, hopefully those numbers are as good or maybe even a little bit better, but one can only dream, and we only have the numbers to go off of for yesterday. But great figures for sure. And with that high note, we have now ended our location unknown news, and we're going to start moving on into the Kharkiv and northern Donbass area. But like I said at the very beginning of the stream, our schedule dictates that we will answer 3 questions from the chat before we move to the next section of the news. And of course, I am duty bound to uphold that obligation. And so we're now going to move into the question segment and answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv and northern Donbass area. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving into our first question segment, we have a super chat from John Boyer, one of our longtime channel viewers and legends, who puts in a $33 super chat and says, any update on status of deliveries of various artillery equipment from Western allies to Ukraine? At least what we know of. Excellent honest coverage by Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, Slava President Zelensky, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the support. And I thank you very much for the kind words about our reporting. I'm very proud that you do find it to be of a high quality. And to answer that question, we don't know a lot at all about when this equipment is going to be transported over. In fact, it came as a shock to us that the Italians even sent any artillery pieces whatsoever. It wasn't there wasn't any lead up to it. They just arrived as far as we knew. And also the Polish seemed to not really be giving a lot of heads up either whenever the Krabs SPGs are being sent over to Ukraine either. They just kind of get an agreement or a deal, and within a week of that deal, and of course we've never heard about it here on this channel, they just show up in Ukraine. So sadly, for most countries, it doesn't seem that they're making that information public about what they're sending over until it's actually there, and then they make it public. We know that the United States, as well as Germany, and I believe the United Kingdom, said that they were going to be sending over M270 MLRS systems, which are the tracked version of the M142. And let me pull up a picture just for everyone to remember what these look like. These are the systems that Ukraine has been hoping for that have a range of around 50 miles. And so they're incredibly capable MLRSs, very good for counter battery fire just because of their range. And we know that around 10 or 14 of those collectively were supposed to be sent over by a coalition of countries that included the United States, Germany, and I believe Britain as well. But we don't know the progress of those being sent over, and we haven't seen them in use yet. And that's usually when I determine that they finally made it there, as if they're finally in use. Because beyond that, we don't actually have any idea of the timetable or the scheduling that they provided to send these things over. Just to give y'all a perspective, at Fort Benning, Georgia, let's say that the United States, and this is just a raw example, the United States hasn't said they're going to send any tanks at the moment, but let's say that they were going to pull some M1 Abrams that are in storage out of the Dagestan area, move them down to Fort Benning, or another military base, maybe the Atlanta International Airport, which is nearby, and then transport them out to Ukraine. The U.S. Department of Defense would tell the Dagestan Army to prepare these tanks for transport. That could take a certain amount of days, as they have to get them ready to move and all of that. So that's about 2 days' time, or it could be a week time, depending on what their schedule looks like there at that specific camp. They then load the tanks onto the trucks, and then they drive them to, let's just say Atlanta, to the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport. They then sit there for an indefinite amount of time, who knows how long, until a plane can finally be arranged from the U.S. military to pick these things up. They most likely take it to an actual air base. I would say most likely, I hate to do this, but they would probably end up at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, or another air base. Maybe there's one at Fort Benning that I don't know about, although it is an Army base. But anyways, they would make it to an airfield, and then they'd sit there until an airplane could be located that could pick those things up and then transport them. They would then be loaded onto the plane, which that, of course, would happen over the course of a day, and then that plane would take those tanks and transport them across the United States, over the Atlantic Ocean, and most likely to Poland, where it would land in Rzhał, which seems to be the major supply hub of all of the U.S. aircraft that are flying to Poland to drop off supplies for Ukraine. It would then land at the airport in Rzhał. The U.S. or the Polish, I'm not really sure who's doing the groundwork there at Rzhał, but they would unload the tanks, and then they would be set aside, most likely in some kind of motor pool, until they could then load those onto trucks, because they don't just drive tanks, just for some of y'all to know. They don't just hop in the tank and drive it somewhere. It's very fuel inefficient, and it's very labor intensive to actually move a tank on its own that far if it's not in combat. So they usually load them up onto a large truck and then transport it the rest of the way, most likely to the Ukrainian border, or they load them up onto a train, which then that train takes it to the Polish border. They have a little bit of a switchover where those M1 Abrams are then transported by a Ukrainian train and into Ukraine. Of course, this is a hypothetical scenario. M1 Abrams have not been agreed to be sent over to Ukraine, but that's kind of the situation that you're looking at with supply if the whole entire thing is revolving around an aircraft. And of course, this could change if it's based off of a ship. A ship's taking an incredibly long amount of time to get anywhere. I believe that a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean, a cargo ship, may take somewhere around 2 weeks to a month, depending on their speed. And so that gives you another perspective if the cargo is being transported by ship, how long it may take for it to get there. And with that in the picture, adding that whole entire thing into the equation, it could be any amount of time until those supplies actually make it to Ukraine. But we could assume that at the shortest, it would most likely take 2 weeks, and at the longest, it could take months, and I can't even give an idea of how many months it would be. And once again, I just want to say this: while that was a very in-depth answer, that's about the most in-depth one I've given to that kind of question. Just consider that this is going off of my layman knowledge, and it seems to make sense because that's how a company like Amazon, UPS, or DHL would operate their cargo, and the Army, while being a military organization, it operates under similar principles because there's only one way you can do something, and so I'm assuming that it most likely operate that way. But then again, take it with a grain of salt. The military may operate a little bit differently, and it may be able to arrive there sooner, or it may be even further than the timetable I've given, and it may be a half year before it gets over there. But with that, I hope that's answered the question to the best of my abilities, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $50 super chat from Michael Hudkins, who says, "Nothing has ever been said about availability of M60A3 tanks. I was in Germany, 4th Armored, and a large quantity around had a 105mm main gun. It's better than its Russian equivalent."
That's very true. The M60 tank was actually the United States' main battle tank throughout most of the Cold War until it was replaced by the M1 Abrams in the late 70s, really the early 80s. But here we can see one. These are pretty decent tanks. Of course, they're emblazoned in the memory of everyone, and these were also used in the movie Patton, just as a cool side fact. But I don't know about these tanks anymore. It seems that the United States has shored these up, and I would say that they're in the condition of the Russian tanks that are in the Far East, where they're just rotting away in a camp, and I think that's kind of what the remaining M60A3s have been relegated to. So I don't know if there's any of these that are operational. We do know that the Turks still use M60s to a decent degree, but I don't know if the United States has been keeping up their own M60s to the point that they're actually operational and can be sent over. Now, I would agree 100% that this would be far better than a T-62 M1, which is what the Russians seem to be using now, and they're starting to try and issue those out. But beyond that, I don't really know enough about the M60A3s here in the United States to say whether these could be sent over or not, and whether they're in operational condition or not. So with that, I'm going to have to declare ignorance, but hopefully we can find an answer to that. And I thank you so much for the support, because it does help our channel to keep running, so that way we can eventually, hopefully, find answers to these questions. And with that, we're on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv and northern Donbass news.
And the last question of this segment goes to Bob the Viking, who puts in a $30 super chat and says, Enforcer Matt, it's officially Bob the Viking. One question, can Ukraine hold on long enough to get the much needed equipment to make an offensive push to move the Ruskies out, or what will it take?
To answer that question, yes, the Ukrainians can hold on until they get equipment. Right now, we have seen, and you know, I don't know if this is going to come as a shock to most people or anything, but we have seen the Ukrainians commit to very little offensive actions themselves, and it seems like they're only able to commit an offensive on one single front. And right now, that is the Kherson area. We've seen them entirely stall their operations near Kharkiv. We've also seen no activity all the way from Stary Saltiv down to Liban. We haven't seen the Ukrainians committing any offensive actions there. We see them giving a lot of pushback in Severodonetsk, but whether that's a defensive or an offensive action is really hard to tell, because neither side has moved for about 2 weeks. So it's really hard to tell if they're trying to actually commit a counterattack or not there, but right now I'm assuming it's most likely a defensive. We haven't seen them commit any offensive actions near the Partisan finger. We saw them commit some offensive action in the Donetsk region last week, but it seems to have stopped now, as it seems that that's also ground to a halt. And so we know that there's no major counterattack going on there. There's no major counterattacks going on the southern front. And the only offensive that we see the Ukrainians operating is the Kherson offensive, which it seems that they're making decent progress in, and that may be why they've committed to it and they're sticking with it. So by and large, much like the Russians, the Ukrainians are also trying to mitigate their supply losses by making sure that a large amount of their front lines also remain static as well. And this is something that a lot of people have to keep in mind, is that the initial opening stage of a war is going to be the most active phase of the war period. That's how it was during World War II. That's how it was during World War I. In World War I, I believe it was actually called the frontier period. There were no trenches. The militaries would just wander around in the forests and shoot at each other. And usually, of course, it incurred massive casualties because machine guns would mow down massive regiments of men. And then eventually they started to dig trench works, and also all of the participating countries at the time, specifically on the Western Front, started to run out of ammunition and supplies that they had stockpiled leading up to the war, and so they had to start curtailing a lot of their activities to make sure that they wouldn't run empty on supplies altogether. And that's what we may be seeing right now in this war, is that both sides, including the Ukrainians, now that they're waiting on Western aid, have pulled back most of their, I guess you could say, offensives and operations to make sure that they don't chew up all of their supplies and get left empty-handed and then be at the mercy of the other side. So that may be what we're seeing right now. And if that is, which is an assumption, by the way, I'll just put that out there, but if that is what we're seeing, then the Ukrainians will be able to hold on, because they have largely stopped all of their activities except for the ones in Kherson, which don't seem to be eating up too many resources right now, considering the level of success they're getting. So with that, I think that they can hold on until Western weapons arrive, and hopefully the urgency is on within the Western governments, and they can actually get that aid there sooner rather than later. And hopefully, considering that I am an American, hopefully the United States can step up their game and deliver more supplies along with our Western allies here in Europe. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and with that, I have noticed that a lot of people stayed around for this question segment, so I guess a lot of y'all enjoyed the long length answers. And with that, that is the end of our question segment. I once again thank y'all for your support to the channel, and I thank y'all so much for asking these great questions. We had some great ones tonight there, and I hope y'all did enjoy the answers as well, as I tried to answer them to the best of my abilities and the best of my knowledge. But I do want to make sure, because these long answers do sound incredibly well informed even to me, I just want to let y'all know again that while they sound very well put together, this is just going off of my knowledge. And my knowledge, while it seems large and endless to some of y'all, in my opinion, is actually somewhat limited. And so I don't want y'all to be taking that and quoting it or anything. That's just what I'm assuming right now, and that's what I can get based off of historical precedent, fact, and also how things normally run within the civilian sector from the knowledge I know there. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move on to the Kharkiv and northern Donbass areas and cover the news there, which we have some interesting bits today. Starting off in the Kharkiv region, we have seen the Ukrainians continue artillery barrages, but once again, there is no activity on the front lines, and we haven't seen the Ukrainians actually pushing the Russians back. It just appears that they're trying to inflict large amounts of casualties here with their artillery. Here we can see the 40th Brigade shelling Russian troops as they are withdrawing from the small village in the Kharkiv salient. We can now see the tanks rolling out, and we can see the camera here focusing on something. We can see an artillery strike there and here, and it looks like there is now a BTR or a BMP that just rolled out of those woods and is trying to get out of there. We can now see that it looks like it went back into the tree line. And now we can see more artillery coming down on the Russian forces here. But it looks like it is missing it a little bit, but we can't even tell where the tank is in the tree line. Well, now we can. It says Brocha Sai. I don't know what that says in Ukrainian, unfortunately, but we could see the tank sitting there. Oh, all right. I said they missed a little bit. That's definitely not a miss. That's a hit. I don't think you even have to have eyes to see that. I think if you were blind, you would have seen the flash from that one. But it looks like the 40th did manage to claim another Russian vehicle, and huge credit to the 40th Artillery Brigade, which has been carrying a lot of the activity in the Kharkiv area so far, as most of the frontline infantry units and mechanized units have largely been sitting still, and it appears that they are also trying to conserve resources as well as the Russians now. With that, we're now going to move outside of Kharkiv to the small village of Libotin, where we've seen today a college get bombed. Of course, an unfortunate scene. I'm just going to let y'all see this quick video showing the destruction of this little college.
2 days ago, Libotin. Everybody helps.
It's always sad to see, and it's great to know that the Ukrainian locals here in this village are going to help out with clearing out this rubble and making sure to see if everyone was okay, if there was anyone here in this college. The Ukrainians have been united ever since the start of this war, and we've seen that the civilian population has been doing the best they can to help each other out, as well as the soldiers at the front. It's literally a nation that's been united by this war, and I would say that if this was a defining moment for this country, this would be much like in American history, the Boston Massacre. I would say that in British history, let me think of something that would be comparable to this in the British history. Oh, yikes, I can't think of anything really, because Britain has such a long hit. Anyways, we'll move on to India. For India, this would be like the Amritsar Massacre. For Russia, I guess you could say this would be like the Soviet flag coming down over the Kremlin and the Russian flag being put up. This is kind of like a moment in Ukraine's history that will define how their culture works from here on out. Kind of like how 9/11 changed the United States in many ways that I know a lot of my viewers were able to experience firsthand. I feel like this war, when Ukraine survives it and wins, will actually be a defining moment in their nation, unify them after 30 years of just kind of being an existing country with no true identity, and now they're going to know themselves as Ukrainians, and now that they've all endured this hardship together, it's certainly going to be, as a historical precedent, a uniting and like glue-like factor amongst the populace. So great to see, and it's wonderful to see these community efforts going on where they make sure to help out each other. With that, we're now going to be moving on into Kharkiv itself, where I'm going to show y'all something of a slightly entertaining video where we see Ukrainian citizens living in their bombed-out apartment and acting like it's a totally normal day. And so, here's the video. and also let me mute it. We can see a rocket sitting there in his room. I'm sure he got that on a discount at a dollar store. And we can see him joking around about shaving his beard. But you just see him enjoying sitting by his rocket. And we can then see the hole where it came in through the roof. It must get drafty in there at night. And it must get drafty through the other floor that it looks like it may have blown through, or the roof. I can't really tell. But I gotta say, very enjoyable thing for this fella, and I hope that he enjoys the free missile that the Russians gave him. It's very rare to get those kinds of munitions. Usually in America you have to get a tax stamp for it, but he got handed this by the Russians absolutely free. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Kharkiv, and we're now going to be moving down the front line past Chuhuiv, which has had no activity, and towards Balaklia, where we've seen that the 93rd Brigade has been doing a large amount of activities today with their artillery only. We haven't seen any infantry activity, just artillery. Starting off with our first bit of video, we've seen the 93rd Brigade, called the Holotny Yar, committing artillery attacks against the Russians, and it looks like they were largely accurate. We can see two BMP-2s here that just got off of a dirt road, turn, and start moving up towards the rest of the Russians, which we can see grouped up here. It looks like a pretty large cackle of them, around 20 or 30. Usually the Russians move around in herds. That's usually a common, I guess you could say, trait of theirs. And we can now see the artillery coming in. Well, looks like the first two shots were pretty far off to the right, but I think they're about to adjust. Now we can see another vehicle burning out there in the field. Can't really tell you what kind it is. It's too hard to tell. And now we can see some Russian vehicles moving out there in the tree line. But I can't really tell you what kind it is again because it's just so hard to see them. We can now see those initial vehicles we saw on the road. This is that same road, finally burning after they've been hit. We didn't see the hit on film, but we do see them brewing up and burning, which does let us know, common sense 2 + 2, they got hit by artillery. It's just a nice little smoldering fire. Pretty smoky if you ask me. I don't think it's a perfect campfire. I think if the fire was burning a little bit more cleanly, I think it would be an enjoyable campfire to be around. And now we can see that someone threw a firecracker or something similar into this fire as it has exploded to a large degree. I think someone should send this back to the camping store they got it from and ask for a refund. That's not supposed to happen with a normal campfire. Now we can see a derelict BTR with the O marking on it. It looks like the tires were blown out, and now it's just sitting on the side of the road. And it looks like we're going to be moving up towards the other BTR. That looks like it flipped upside down in the explosion, and we can see the turret just a few more feet up the road upside down as well. We can also see some of the tires just strewn about the road. Looks like there's going to be a used tire market in Ukraine after this war, which a lot of y'all, if you ever live in big cities, y'all will know that's one of like the quickest setup shops that you've ever seen in town is always the used tire store. And I think there's going to be a lot of those in Ukraine after this war for BTRs. We can see another BTR in the field that was destroyed and burned. I think we saw this one earlier in the film. The turret, of course, popped off and just landed right beside the tank, neatly like a Lego set. Hopefully they'll be able to put the tank back together. With a quick tutorial, perhaps? And now we can see a little Tiger armored car, it looks like, that also got hit. But I don't think we ever saw that in the film, as like an actual target. We can also see a Russian that appears that he's taking a nap. Yeah, I think he's just sleeping a little. The drone's focusing on him a lot. I hope it doesn't, because I don't know if YouTube's going to find out that he's not sleeping. Oh, that's a great question, Matthew. I just saw you put up that poll. And we can say, wait a minute, that's not a Tiger. That's some other kind of armored car. I can't tell you what kind, but that does not look like a Tiger. It looks like something that's a little bit more beefier. That was actually a nice armored car. I'm not going to lie, you know, don't really like Russian equipment by and large, but that was a quality armored car. Now we've returned to the original footage of that same road where we can still see the smoldering mess that the Russians became, and then the video ends. Wonderful to see that the 93rd Brigade was able to levy some effective artillery fire against the Russians today, and we have no idea how many of the infantry were wiped out, but we could see one that went to sleep on film, and so I'm assuming that there were multiple others that we did not see that were in the tree lines near these vehicles when they got attacked. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of news further down the line, once again committed by the 93rd Brigade, where we saw them hit more vehicles today in a different part of the front. Correction, that is actually a duplicate video. Apparently the links were messed up, and so I got a second clone further down the line, although I copied a whole different video and pasted it in there. So, hate to say that, but we only got one clip today. But still, several Russian losses in vehicles only were shown on film, and we did see a couple of, one Russian soldier go to sleep, and I think many others decided it was nap time. Well, that we're now going to be moving further down the front and past Izium, where there's been no activity today. It has seemed that the front line there has fallen still. But we have seen that the Ukrainians are taking sponsorships, and it's always good to know. It's always great to know that they are plugging other companies out there that are helping them out. And this time, it's Mitsubishi, which is a name that you can rely on, as you can actually mount MLRS rocket launchers into the truck bed and use it as a pretty effective MLRS. And so here's a video of this Mitsubishi L200 being used as a rocket launcher. Unlike the ISIS trucks, it doesn't catch on fire. The epitome of reliability. That's the end of that brief little video, but I liked it. It was nice to see, and I hope that the Ukrainians are actually able to effectively use that thing, and it's not just to try and stopgap fill up the forces, because while it's neat, it is probably a little impromptu designed and made, and so I'm not really sure if those rockets are accurate at all, but I hope that they are, or otherwise this may just be a waste of time and resources, but a cool video to see nonetheless. With that, we're now going to be moving past the Lehman area and down the length of the Severodonetsk River. And I remember I told you all this a while ago, and it does turn out, it has seemed to become true, is that once the Russians reach the Severodonetsk River, nothing's going to happen anymore because it's going to be nearly impossible for them to cross it. And over this entire length from Yampol to Rubizhny, where they actually are on the banks of the Severodonetsk River, we hardly see any action whatsoever across the entirety of the river. And when we do, it's incredibly rare and a small skirmish that occurs between both sides. So, thankfully, that turned out to be true, and it does seem that the Severodonetsk will be a defensive barrier in between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and will give the Ukrainians a decent amount of breathing room inside of this, I guess you could say, bulge that they have on the front lines. With that, we're now going to move into the city of Lysychansk, where we saw today a brand new MLRS in action. Now, this thing is really cool. It's a Birivy chassis that has the 220mm MLRS rocket launcher on the rear. And just to give Birivy, let me see if I can pull that up. Here's a Birivy, another form of Birivy. This is not the same one in the film, but you can see that Birivy actually makes some pretty decent looking trucks. I mean, they look pretty modern. They look pretty cool. I don't know if they're really good, but they look modern at least, and that's what's cool. So sadly, I can't really give you any like quantitative statements about this, like how much horsepower or how well it actually does, but you can admit that that is a mean looking MLRS. We can now see them moving it out of its hidden position. And you're about to see that this thing has a pretty wide turning radius. I would honestly say that it has the turning radius of a drunk teenager who just got out of a prom after party. We can now see them prepping the MLRS to fire. of course, aiming it. And then we saw something that I'm going to have to backtrack on with the Russians. It appears that every MLRS unit has to prep each rocket in the tube to fire, which seems to just be standard now on the heavier rocket launching systems. So it doesn't appear to be an exclusively Russian thing. We can now see the Ukrainians having to do this as well. And finally, the rockets launch. And boy, are they massive. 220mm rockets are not small by any means. We've known that for a while. But actually seeing them in slow motion and how large they are compared to the truck is always shocking. We can now see that it got packed up after firing off its load of rockets, and it's now on the move again. That's the end of the video, but a really cool one to see, and it is cool that the Ukrainians do manufacture their own trucks and then mount the MLRS launchers onto them, instead of an older vehicle that was from Soviet times that was inherited by the Ukrainian forces. With that, we're now going to move on to Severodonetsk itself, where we've had a heavily documented day of fighting. 5 different bits of news from the Severodonetsk area alone. And we're going to start on the northern side of town, and we're going to move our way down to the south to the village of Severodonetsk, which is on the southern side of Severodonetsk. Starting off on the northern side, we've seen Ukrainian soldiers using Russian foxholes as they advance through the woods. Let me get this unmuted. We can hear the firefight going on. And we see the Ukrainians moving through the brush. And we can now see them crawling into the Russian foxholes that were once occupied by the Russians, but now they're in Ukrainian hands. Really cool to know that they are advancing somewhere in the forest where they are hopping into a Russian foxhole that the Russians once were using. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of our Severodonetsk news, where we can see Ukrainians fighting inside of the Azov plant in the city. It sounds very similar to Azov, like the Azovstal factory in Mariupol. And just like the Azovstal, the Azot is also a large factory that is within Severodonetsk. And here we can see Ukrainian soldiers firing out of it. And we can also see that this guy is laying down so much fire that it looks like his silencer is about to overheat because it's smoking. See this guy spraying out of the window. And now his silencer is just roasting up there. It's like a well-done hot dog that's been burned by your father on Father's Day when he's grilling on the grill. Oh, I don't know if that's normal for a silencer to do. I've shot a couple of silenced guns, and usually it's just a clip that I shoot out of them, but I've never seen them smoke like that. So I think that silencer may be getting a little used, but I'm not entirely sure about that. That is an assumption on my part. And if y'all do know better, and that's just what silencers do, let me know in the live chat. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of news from Severodonetsk, where we have seen the fighting continues, and this is once again more footage from the Ukrainians, and we can see here that they are using tanks in the city, which is a rare sight. We rarely ever see Ukrainian tanks in action, but here's an example of that very thing. You see a little dachshund there, very cute. I like that. Hopefully it stays safe. It is a dangerous place. We can now see some Ukrainian soldiers surveying their finds on Tinder, because we do know at the beginning of the war the Russians were actually on Tinder, which was weird, and they may be trying to find matches in their area. Who knows? But if they do, I think they'll be calling in artillery on them, and it'll be a very explosive date, to say the least. We can now see again the Ukrainian tank. I can't tell you what kind it is, I feel like it's a T-80 of some sort, but I can't be certain. An explosion just occurred right on top of him, and it seems to have shooken a little bit of stuff out of the ceiling, and the Dachshund is still with them. God bless that little dog, poor thing. That one was real close. You could actually just see the glaze of orange come over the staircase right there. Ooh. You know that's gotta be crazy to feel that underground wherever they are in a basement. I'm sure that's rocking the ground, the walls, and the ceiling and everything. And again, it seems like the Dachshund's actually staying kind of calm, which is good to know. Now we see the little Dachshund again with another soldier, and he's just chilling on the staircase. We can now see it going out to do a scouting operation. Best of luck to him. I think they need to give this little puppy some body armor. We've got some Ukrainian soldiers walking past the camera on a road. And we can see some very colorful sleeping mats there on two of them, a blue and a green one. And so I'm guessing that these are like the Star Wars mats because they're the color of the lightsabers or whatnot. But I'm not really a big... I don't watch Star Wars a lot. Don't really know a lot about it. I just know that the good guys always have like green or blue or something. Anyways, really neat little video. And it's interesting to see that they have little dogs that they carry around with them on the front lines. And I think that that one wasn't really trained in anything rather than being cute and being pettable. So, wonderful to see. And with that, we're now going to move on to our fourth bit of video from Severodonetsk, where we can see another clip of the Ukrainians in action in the city. And so, here's the video. It's got to be muted. We can see a man down there with an RPG, and he just fired it. Now, it looks like he's trying to see where it hit. He's just standing there. Now he's crouching, and now he's turned around, and he's trotting back towards everyone else. And he's got a smile on his face, which lets me know that whatever he was aiming for, he may have hit. With that, we're now going to move out of Severodonetsk city, and we're now going to move down to the village south of Severodonetsk, where we have seen the Georgian volunteers at work again. The Georgians have been there for quite some while. They were moved in near the start, and here we can see them doing what they do best, which is war. It seems like the Georgians have now become the volunteers of war. We can see them using the drone to find out where the Russians are, and now they're firing mortars at them. They're now firing the mortars over and over again. Hopefully pounding the Russians, but we haven't seen any footage of that yet. Hopefully we will soon. And now we see the footage of those mortars making impact. And now we're just watching the silent film. I would say that this is very similar, if they do hit a Russian vehicle, to a Charlie Chaplin show. It'll, of course, be hilarious and will ensue a lot of laughter at the Russians in the pickle that they find themselves in. But sadly, the footage is pretty zoomed out. We can't really tell a lot, but we can see a couple of mortar impacts like this one right here above this compound. So unfortunately, we can't tell if Russian units were destroyed, but we did see that Georgian mortar fire land further downfield. And it looks like they were trying to hit some kind of compound that most likely had Russians in it, but we couldn't really tell on film. And so I don't know if this actually incurred any losses or any damage to the Russians. With that, we're now going to move out of Severodonetsk, and once again, after going over all that news, which would make you think that something has happened in Severodonetsk, nothing has happened in Severodonetsk. While we have massive amounts of combat footage that just came out of there today, the Ukrainians have not made any ground. Neither have the Russians. It's still a stalemate in that city, and it looks like neither side is going to be making any kind of ground anytime soon. I'd also like to make note that we haven't seen any offensive actions heading towards Lysychansk, and so right now I do not see any credibility to the idea that Lysychansk will fall within several days. I did see some people say that in the live chat here a minute ago, and as of the moment, it does not look like the Russians are actually pushing an offensive into Lysychansk, and as far as I know, this front line here is not accurate. I will have to get some more video evidence to see, but I think that the Russians are still down here near Tashkivka on the P-66, and they haven't even made it up to Bila Ora, south of Lysychansk. But we'll have to check that over and make sure that's accurate. But I think that the Russians are trying to push through Severodonetsk and then go to Lysychansk instead. With that, we're now going to move further down the line and towards Kharkiv, where we've then seen an Mi-8 in action today, again from the Ukrainians. We've been getting a lot of helicopter footage from the Ukrainians today, and while the Mi-8s are old, still very cool. When you see the cameras focusing on the rocket pod on the right side pylon on the helicopter, they've now tilted up, and now they're firing off those rockets like there is no tomorrow. You now see them popping off their flares, and now they're hitting the ground as fast as possible, and the video ends. Hopefully those rockets were on target, and hopefully they hit the Russians pretty effectively. We're now going to move on to our next bit of news, which is actually, believe it or not, behind the lines, north of Severodonetsk, and near the village of, let me make sure, Marynivka, where we see the Russians shoot down a Ukrainian drone, but unlike the Ukrainians that only use like a Piorun or a Stinger to shoot down an Orlan, it looks like the Russians pulled out the big guns to try and impress the Russian citizenry with this video, and they used a Tor-2 to shoot down a drone. Here's the video. We see the huge setup that the Russians have to operate this Tor. It looks like they have enough radars to be able to pick up a spaceship on the moon. And now we can see that it looks like they're turning on this Tor. That's been beautifully set up in this field. I mean, like, the setup here is just wonderful. It looks like they probably took at least a day to set this up and make it look pretty, which lets me know that this is definitely an active, I guess you could say anti-air unit, because it's not like they move around a lot. I'm sure they just sit in one spot once the war starts and they just wait until something happens. We can now see a Tor on the move. Clearly marked with a Z because we all know that the Russians' average viewer is not that bright, and so they may think this is Ukrainian if it doesn't have the largest Z painted onto the side. And we can see it clearing a path through this giant ryegrass field, just slowly chugging along. Now we see them pop up the radar again. Now we see the mega radar, which I don't even know how that really works in unison with the Tor, considering it's got its own radar. But there's probably a way that it works. Now the Russians are giving a great little cinematic of the Tor. Oh, look, that's so cool. Wow. Now we can see the top pop open where it looks like the surface-to-air missiles are stored. Interesting. Anyways, we'll continue the video.
Есть цель. Азимут 50. Высота 2000 метров. Дальность 28 километров. Курсовой параметр 0.
Who the hell is he yelling to? No one yelled back. I think he was yelling that at the cameraman. Hang on. Wait a minute. What? Maybe we can get the interior of a Tor AA tank. Maybe that will give us an answer to this. Interior of a tiger. No, we want the interior of a Tor. I want to see the interior layout of a Tor, because I don't think that, I think that guy's in a compartment on his own. Who the hell is he yelling at? Oh, it's not going to show me. Sorry about that, y'all, but sadly I won't be able to get an interior view. But no one yelled back anything to him. He just started yelling that stuff off on his own.
Азимут 50.
There he goes again.
2000 метров. Дальность 28 километров.
It's like he's reading off a script.
Скорость 250 метров в секунду. Цель в зоне.
Okay, now, okay, wait a minute. There was another guy over there. We just saw his arm. So he was yelling at someone, but they never yelled anything back, so what was the point of saying all that? We now see the missile traveling on its way. We're going to see if we see a flash of an explosion that shows us that a drone was hit.
Есть попадание.
So it looks like they did hit a drone. That's usually what we see in Ukrainian footage. Is that a... I don't know if that's a Ukrainian drone or not. Let me go back. Let me go look. Ukrainian drones. And let's see if we can find a similar drone to that. If we can't, then they're lying. Let's see. We'll just pull up images and see if we have an image of a Ukrainian drone that looks like that one. It should be a smaller handheld drone. That one looks kind of like it, I guess. Let me go back and look at that again. Okay, so that's what it looks like. That's what that... Nope, that's not close. That's close, but no cigar. Let's scroll down a little bit more. I don't see any pictures of a drone that looks like that. Maybe that one. Well, that's a model, so that's definitely not a normal drone. Wow, I think they just... now, this may be a huge assumption. There's an Orlan. But... what the hell? There's no drone on Google Images that looks like that. I don't even know if there's a public list of the different kinds of drones Ukraine's using. But golly, what is this thing? And it doesn't have any Ukrainian markings on it. Of course, it's so small that wouldn't matter. And hang on, wait a minute. I just had the ultimate debunking here. How the hell do you have an explosion that looks like a small atomic bomb? Let's go back and look at that again. Right there, look at the size of that explosion. That's enough to take down like an SU-27. And then after that massive explosion, you get an intact drone out of the whole thing. Now that is BS right there. That's got to be BS, because there's no way that an explosion like that occurs and you don't even see the slightest shrapnel tear on this little drone. This is all bull. And this whole entire thing has probably been staged. They probably flew some kind of a fake drone out there to pick it up and then shoot at it. And they're telling me that this Tor system with the massive radars that's connected to couldn't pick up that drone until it was like a mere 7 miles away, 5 miles away. Don't believe it. And on top of that, showing this little clip here at the end like it's a Ukrainian drone shot down, that's very fishy to me. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, which is now out of the northern Donbass area, and is now going to pick up in the southern front and the Partisan held area, which we'll be covering here in a second. But of course, as I am duty-bound and sworn by my own oath, I have to make sure to answer 3 questions from the chat before we move on to that next question segment. And so, we are going to answer 3 questions. And with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $50 super chat from Dirty Diapers, who says, Enforcer Matt and the Enforcer, do you guys watch Denis Davidov's YouTube channel? He is a Ukrainian airline pilot on hiatus that did airline pilot experiences, but has changed his focus on similar work on what this channel does. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much for the support. I think that's the first time you've ever supported us, because I would have remembered a name like that. Is that correct, Matthew?
I think might have supported one other time.
If it was, it must have been a long time ago, because I think that's the first time I remember hearing that. And if it's your first time, then thank you for the support. And if it's your second or third time, thank you once again. We always thank everyone for their support. And also, I have heard a lot about Denis Davidov. A lot of people have recommended for me to bring him on as a guest star. But the thing is that I don't have a lot of time. And so sadly, I've never actually watched his show, but I'm sure that it is pretty good. So sadly, the answer to that is no. I have dropped by there here and there and watched maybe a minute or two of it, but a minute or two of watching is just not good enough to get an idea of what a channel is really about. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you so much for the incredible support, because that does help us out a lot and helps us to continue running this channel. And so thank you once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $33 super chat from John Boyer. And thank you very much, John, for your continued support of the channel and helping us keep running. And also thank you for your continued viewership as well. John says, thanks for the in-depth on the delivery question. It was a bit of a loaded question. I look forward to your coverage every single night, save Mondays. The Ukrainians have Putin's number, and bravo Ukraine, and Enforcer Matt.
Well, thank you so much for the support, and I thank you very much for enjoying my longer-winded answers. I'm always in a debate as to whether the answers should be longer-winded or not, because sometimes people do love to get detailed answers, but then other times there are people in the live chat, they're like, oh, hurry up, you know, like, I hate these, oh. But I think some of them are really good, and I really want to answer all of them like that for the most part if I can. But sometimes I feel like there's a lot of pressure from the live chat that makes me kind of feel like I have to try and, you know, like give quick answers. But I do thank you very much for enjoying the in-depth answers tonight, because I'm trying to see if people do enjoy those. And I think that it does weigh in a lot of information and a lot of extra, I guess you could say, answers to stuff that we don't really cover on the normal news, because it's nothing that, you know, is normally just covered. So I thank you very much for supporting us with that, and I thank you very much once again for giving supportive words to our channel. It does mean a lot, and it helps us in our minds to keep on going, knowing that we're doing something that people do enjoy. Also, Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava. And also, I do think the Ukrainians have Putin's number as well. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment. And I thank you once again, John, for the massive amounts of support. You've helped us out a lot on running this channel, and we're always grateful to you and everyone else who helps us to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to cover the Southern Front news. And with that, on to the last question of this segment.
And before I read off the last question of the segment, let me recognize a donation without a comment from Roel Bors, who puts in a $50 super chat, and we appreciate the support very much, Roel. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. That's a very unusual but cool name. But thank you very much for your support of the channel. And Enforcer, if you'd like to add anything to that before we move on to our next super chat.
And I got to thank you so much once again, Roel. I know you didn't throw in any questions, and of course we always like people to, if they send in support, throw in a question so that way we can at least give something right then and there for the support. But of course, it does help us to keep running these streams, and I guess if that's a payment in your mind, then that's fine with me. But I do thank you so much for the support once again, and it does mean a lot as it helps us to run this channel. And so, if you do ever have a question, make sure to add one on, because we'll be more than happy to answer any question you have. And of course, we're always appreciative for all the support that helps us to keep running. And so thank you once again, Bor. Roel Bor. That's an interesting name, kind of a tongue twister for me, because that's hard for me to say. But with that, I thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on out of this question segment and into our last segment of news, which will cover the Southern Front, our 2 bits of international news in the United States, and finally, the speech from President Zelensky. Starting off behind the lines in an area that everyone has a question about, what is the red area? What is this? I see a million people asking this question all the time, and sadly it's not explained in the map legend, and I can't really find a way to explain this often in the stream, but this red area here is where supposed partisan activities are occurring. Partisan activities are where a group of people behind enemy lines decides that they're not really happy with what the enemy is doing, their occupiers are doing, and then they pick up arms and they start to fight against them in kind of like guerrilla warfare in a way. And today we've actually seen them doing a lot, and starting off in the actual area of partisan control from what we know, we can see the partisans burning a Russian main battle tank in this video. And so here's the clip. Can't really see it a lot, it is nighttime, but we can see that they lit up some kind of a Molotov and threw it down onto what looks like a Russian T-72B3, and now we can see that it's on fire and burning. Hopefully the fire will spread to the engine bay. Actually, it looks like it, I don't know if this is supposed to be seizure-inducing or what, but it looks like they're actually burning different kinds of Russian vehicles rather than the tank. At the end of the video, we could see some kind of an armored car. But really great to see. And it's good to know that the partisans are actually inflicting damage to the Russians behind the lines before they could even get to the front. So, of course, great to see, and it's good to know that the partisans actually do exist and they are causing some kind of damage. With that, we're now going to move to the front lines, and I have to say, it finally happened. Now, everyone was wondering if those T-62s that were moving around were actually ever going to be used, because we saw them moving in, but we never saw anything about them since then. So everyone was asking, including myself in my own mind, are they actually being used? Were those just brought in just to bring them in? Are they going to be given to the DPR or the LPR? But we can actually see that the Ossetian forces, which come from this little northern area in Georgia right here in this dotted line, they're in the southern front fighting alongside the Russians, and they've been given T-62s. They did it. They literally did it. The Russians are now giving out 60 to 70-year-old tanks to their main fighting forces on the front lines, and we can see that here in this video.
Здравия желаю, Сергей Иванович. Танковое подразделение, сформированное по вашему указанию, двигается к месту постоянной дислокации, к отряду Алания. Грозный осетинский танковый батальон!
Alright, now I want y'all to note something here. This thing has ERA tiles sloppily placed on it. It's also missing, this is how poorly kept these tanks are, it's missing a complete side fender on one side of the tank. Completely gone. That lets y'all know in how bad of a state this tank really is. It's just awful looking. And they're giving these to frontline units now. So this one passes by. And after that, I want y'all to notice this. They sped up the footage. You can tell because when the Russians start waving to the cameraman, their arms are moving at light speed. And this lets me know that the Russians are speeding up the footage because they feel that the T-62s may be looked at as incompetent and lacking on the modern battlefield. And so they sped up the footage to try and make the tanks look faster and more maneuverable. And so note that while these tanks pass by. Watch the quick arm wave. Look at that. Look at that again. Their arms are moving at an ungodly speed, which lets us know that the footage has been sped up considerably. And they're trying to make them look fast by doing this. So now we can see that they put the footage in normal mode, and you can see them lifting up their hands and waving normally, and see the comparison there. They were a lot slower in moving their arms up, and they literally sped up the old footage to try and make it look like those tanks could move a lot faster than they really were. These guys are gonna get butchered. It's honestly sad. Really, I mean, like, I know I just laughed at that, but the Russians are literally giving them fodder now. Now they're trying to buy another one. Oh man, I know it's hilarious to see, it really is, but at the same time it's very sad to see because while they're Russians, oh man, the Russian government cares so little about their allied fighting forces and their own fighting forces that they will give them stuff like that they know that these guys are going to die in. They've pretty much given them a coffin on wheels, and they're going to drive that thing to the front lines with confidence because their commanders told them, and they're of course so ignorant they probably don't know any better, that that tank is actually going to be effective, and that thing is going to get wiped off the face of the earth. It's not going to stand a chance. And I just, it's hilarious at the same time, and it's not, because you know that the Russian government doesn't actually care about these guys, and that's why they wound up with the tank that bad. So with that, we're now going to move on to our next clip of news, but that was what the thumbnail was about, and that was also what the title was about as well. They finally did it, and the Russians are now using ancient tanks. They say that these things are almost 50 years old, but that's actually a very conservative estimate because that would have placed them into the 70s. These things are around 60 years old because they actually were being used in the mid to late 60s. So just keep that in mind as well. With that, we're now going to move further down the front line and past the entire area of the southern front as no other activities occurred there. And we're now going to go to the city of Enerhodar. Enerhodar made huge news at the very beginning of the war as the Russians raced towards the Zaporizhzhia power plant and managed to capture it, which is here in the yellow square. Since then, the Russians have, of course, controlled this town, and we've heard that the kidnappings have been out of control. According to this news article, mass kidnappings have been occurring to such a degree against the nuclear plant workers and the residents that, according to the mayor that is still there, it has been incredibly concerning, and it's become catastrophic to both Enerhodar and also the power plant's operations. Hopefully something can be done to make sure the reactor stays stable and that the people who have been kidnapped can be safe, hopefully, although the Russians are a very questionable group and are most likely committing atrocities against these people. With that, we're now going to move out of the Enerhodar area from that unfortunate news, and we're now going to start moving down to Kherson. And before we cross the banks of the Dnipro River and go to the western bank of the river, we're going to go down here to this little bit of news near Kherson. The Partisan forces just destroyed a couple of tanks and vehicles in the last bit of film, but they also have been kidnapping Russian soldiers outright, which has been a little bit insane to me. And in this video, we can see a Partisan standing by 2 captured Russians here in this film. I don't know how this happened, but this is in fact a Partisan, and those are 2 Russian soldiers. And so here's the video.
21 июня. Херсонские партизаны продолжают борьбу с рашистами. Мы продолжаем бороться с оккупантами и помогать нашим вооруженным силам в освобождении от рашистов Херсонской области. Отдельно хочу обратиться к армии Российской Федерации. Уверен, что во время вечерней проверки вы не досчитались 2 человек. Вот они.
I don't know how in the world you're in the Russian army and you get captured by a partisan. I have no idea how that happens. But you know, these guys must feel like idiots, you know, because while partisans are effective, you know, in their own way, partisans are hardly at all a fighting force. Usually they only have rifles and they have very few of those. And somehow these guys got captured. This is like the epitome of Three Stooges levels of comedy, is that you get captured by partisan forces instead of the regular Ukrainian army. I'm not going to rat on the partisans, though. It looks like they're doing incredible work behind the lines and a great job at it. But man, what in the world were these Russians doing? Sleeping in a dumpster, dog drunk, and the partisans just tied them up and took them here? I don't know. But this guy's also got a little bit of drip, I'm not going to lie. He's got some Yeezys, and he's also got some sweatpants. So I think this would be something that Matthew would consider drip. I'm not really one for that kind of drip, but the guy does have some style. So I'll give him that. And he's also got 2 Russian soldiers, which does add a lot to the classiness of the whole thing. With that, we're now going to move on to the western bank of the Dnipro River, where we've gotten a decent amount of news, actually, from every single side of the finger, and also near Kherson itself. Starting off on the most northerly and easterly tip of the finger, we've seen that the 60th Brigade has fired artillery at the Russians, and it appears that they were able to score some hits. Here we can see the artillery firing. I'm going to back out of that statement. I don't know if they scored any hits. I think this video doesn't show any. I was thinking about another one that we'll see here in a bit. That's the end of the little video, but it's cool to see that the 60th Brigade is hammering away at the Russians with the artillery pieces they have. It does appear to be a more dated Soviet-era artillery piece, but hopefully with the drones that they're most likely using with this piece, it can be fired accurately right onto Russians. And with that, we are on to the next bit of news from the Kherson finger. Moving towards Dagestan, we've seen a Ukrainian SPG-9 hitting the Russian forces. SPG-9s are dated, but we did do a little bit of an ammo review earlier on in the war, and we did find out that these things do have enough penetrating power to punch through Russian armor. So while dated, they are still effective. When you see that they fired, you can hear that little ring, and of course some dramatic music plays in the background, and they hit that vehicle dead on. It looks like they fired a high explosive towards the ground somewhere near that vehicle. And good hits by the SPG-9 crew, and hopefully they can continue on that kind of work throughout the rest of the war. Moving on down towards Limanets, we've now seen artillery hitting the Russians again. This time, credit goes to the 28th Brigade. Of course, music is playing. They're surveying the fields, and now the artillery comes in. And as we know, when the artillery comes down, the Russians run around. The Russians and their artillery positions, it looks like their towed artillery, are clearly not having a fun time right now as they are suffering counter battery fire, the epitome of a bad time in the artillery. Looks like that shell got pretty close to one of the pieces and nearly hit it dead on, most likely causing a decent amount of shrapnel damage to that specific piece. I think we're about to see the next round come in right on top of it. That was kind of close, but we can see that some kind of a fire or something is broken out on the piece. And then the video ends. So it looks like they may have been able to heavily damage one towed artillery piece and maybe lightly damage another one. But then again, those are assumptions, but we could see Ukrainian artillery landing onto that Russian artillery unit. Credit, of course, goes to the 28th Brigade, which did conduct that artillery strike. With that, we're now going to be moving down into Kherson itself, right outside of it, where we've seen a barrage in the south by a grad. This grad was from the 36 separate... Wow, I just really stuttered through that one, didn't I? But this barrage was from a BM-20 grad of the 36 separate Marine Brigade, and here I'm going to let y'all see this wonderful little video. Seems that they've caused a small fire. The grass is incredibly dry in this area. And now we got copyrighted music, so let me just mute that. Now you can see the MLRS barrage coming down on the Russians, most likely. It looks like most of it's landing in a tree line. And for unguided rockets falling into a massive area, most of them fell within the tree line right there at the opening part, which was impressive. And now you can see, of course, the normal MLRS fire. You can even see an outlier way out there, like a half mile away from the rest of them. But, of course, they just fall in massive groups, causing indiscriminate damage to whatever is in its, I guess you could say, radius. Wonderful to see. Hopefully there were Russian units knocked out there, but of course that is only an assumption. We're not entirely sure. With that, we're now going to move out of the southern front. We do know that the Ukrainians are still pushing a counterattack here, but we don't know how much success they've been met with so far. We've once again heard that they've eked out a couple of extra miles of ground, perhaps, across the entirety of the front line, but where specifically and how effective that was is still yet to be determined, and so we will be waiting for more news on that. Moving off the front line and towards Mykolaiv today, we can see that Russian shells once again landed near Mykolaiv, as the Russians are, of course, trying to destroy the Ukrainian forces further behind the lines and most likely attack the Ukrainian civilians that are within the relative safety of Mykolaiv. It appears that they were trying to attack some kind of a storage depot that was within a residential area, and they only managed to hit one shot, and it was on the single warehouse, so we didn't see any subsequent fire or an explosion, which means that that storage warehouse may have been empty. Usually whenever we see an attack on some kind of supply depot, there's usually an ensuing fire that's incredibly large and leads to a massive explosion, but we didn't see that here. With that, that is the end of that video, and we're now going to move on outside of Ukraine, as we've now covered all of the southern front news, and we're now moving over across the seas to the United States of America. Now, a lot of people who wander through, there's a lot of, well, not a lot of people, a few people that come through for some reason, and I'm going to give a little bit of speech here because I don't give this one much, want to make the United States the focal point of the Ukraine war, which doesn't make much sense, and they usually try and do it in a political light. And I just once again want to say, because I think a lot of new viewers come through and they never hear me give this spiel, but this channel does not focus on politics of any nature, of any sort, of any kind around the world. We do not pick political sides, and we also do not like political arguments here on this channel, specifically American ones. American politics has become largely divisive in modern times, regardless whether you're from one side or another. Usually it just leads to fights. And of course, this news and this channel right now is focusing entirely on the Ukraine war, which makes the United States and its internal politics a sideshow, as the front lines in Ukraine are the primary focus of the stream. So, I just want to let everyone know, once again, as a PSA, that this channel does not focus on politics, specifically American ones, and we would like if y'all would refrain from discussing them. I know someone's about to say war is politics, and I can kind of get where y'all are coming from, but when you're talking about a war that's in between Ukraine and Russia, what the Republican and Democrat parties are doing in the United States thousands of miles away is really inconsequential politics. But with that, we're now going to move to Miami to start off this whole entire news here in the United States, where we can see that the city of Miami is actually doing something that a lot of y'all have been asking for. A lot of y'all have been asking, is there any way that I can send my guns to Ukraine? We found out that the city of Miami has come up with a way to do that through a gun buyback program. They are buying guns from the public at discount prices, which was kind of a little offensive to me, the prices that were listed here. But this is a way that you can send your weapons to Ukraine if you were wanting them to go over. Now, one thing that made me kind of scoff is that I would have been much happier with this if the police were doing a buyback program, because buyback programs are a little controversial here in America. But considering that it is going to Ukraine, I would highly support this. And if anyone would like to hand over their firearms, maybe we take a weekend trip to Miami and hand it over to the police there. Apparently, they're going to be sending them over to the Ukrainians. Anyways, they give $50 for pistols, $100 for shotguns, and $150 for powerful quote-unquote rifles, such as the AK-47 or an AR-15. Okay, let's start this off. Pistols are not cheap. The usual pistol's around $500. A shotgun, now that can kind of range. There's a big range with shotguns. Rifles, however, the cheapest AR-15 that you're ever going to get a hold of will be $600-something, and the most expensive ones can be well into the thousands. And so, considering it's a buyback program where, you know, supposedly you're supposed to be getting equal value back for your guns, at least that's how it's been explained to me before, and I may be wrong thinking that. This is pretty low, and I understand that they're using taxpayer money to buy back these guns, which does make sense that you wouldn't want to be literally buying them at market value right now, because guns are outrageously, insanely priced. You know, like a simple 1911 is now $700 or $800. But still, I mean, like, considering it's a buyback program, the amount they're willing to pay for these kinds of guns is incredibly small. And for that reason alone, it's taking it from the perspective of charity for Ukraine and trying to help them out into kind of like the political sphere here in the United States, which of course makes things controversial. And it makes me think about getting my value out of the gun, because if they're actually paying me for it, I wouldn't give over any of my guns because they're much more valuable than $150, and all I got's rifles. And so with that, there is a buyback program, and I'm not going to trash on this too much. I mean, like, you know, I'm not getting political here either. I'm just saying if they're going to buy back a gun from you, these are dirt cheap prices that they're willing to offer. But still, if you would like to give over your guns to Ukraine, and you were willing to do that for free initially, you will actually be paid a little bit of money for handing one over. So that is an option if anyone would like to take a trip to Miami and do that. So with that, we're now going to move out of Miami, and we're now going to move to Washington, D.C., where we have heard some great news. Apparently, the U.S. Congress is going to be overlooking the idea of declaring Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. This will occur on Thursday, which is tomorrow, June 23rd, and hopefully the results will be promising. If they are declared that, it is of course a symbolic thing, but we will be treating the Russians much like the Iranians, which we have labeled for a long time as a state sponsor of terrorism. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the United States and all the way back to Ukraine, and we're now going full circle and returning back to Kyiv, where we passed over the very start of the stream. There was no news that came from Kyiv today. So, with that, here's the speech from the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who stayed in Ukraine when he had a choice to leave, President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so here is his speech.
Українки, наші захисники і наші захисниці. Сьогодні 22 червня, день скорботи і вшанування пам'яті жертв війни. Тієї війни, яка назавжди мала залишитись в історії ХХ століття і ніколи не мала повторитись, але повторюється. Сьогодні немає дефіциту слів про те, що Росія зробила 24 лютого, те ж саме, що нацисти 22 червня. Багато про це сказано. Я хочу додати тільки одне: Тоді між ранком вторгнення і поразкою агресора минуло 1418 днів. Ми ж маємо звільнити нашу землю і прийти до перемоги. Але швидше, значно швидше. Це наша національна мета, і ми маємо працювати на її реалізацію щоденно. Не тільки держава, а кожен громадянин, кожна громадянка на тому рівні, на якому це можливо. Від самого ранку я продовжив телефонний марафон заради позитивного рішення по кандидатству для України. Сьогодні 11 лідерів. Болгарія. Подякував пану прем'єр-міністру Болгарії Петкову за підтримку України і розвитку всієї Європи за нашою участю. Латвія. Обговорили з паном прем'єр-міністром Карінчем співпрацю між нашими країнами, між Україною і Європейським Союзом, а також наші спільні можливості захистити Європу від тих криз, які влаштовує Росія, зокрема продовольчі. Греція. Був радий почути слова щирої підтримки України. Маємо з паном прем'єр-міністром однакове бачення історичної ваги рішення, яке очікується від Європейської Ради. Швеція. Обговорили з пані прем'єр-міністром Андерсон перспективи двосторонньої співпраці та взаємодії на рівні європейських структур. Естонія. Подякував пані прем'єр-міністру Каллас за незмінну підтримку України. Обговорили пріоритети нашої співпраці та порядок денний в контексті саміту НАТО в Мадриді наступного тижня. Чехія. Плідна розмова з паном прем'єр-міністром Фіалою. Обговорили пріоритети головування Чехії в Раді Європейського Союзу в наступні півроку. А зараз я впевнений, що голос Чехії за Україну. Бельгія. Подякував пану прем'єр-міністру Де Кро за підтримку нашої європейської перспективи і запросив відвідати Україну. Сподіваюсь, що Бельгія візьме істотну участь у післявоєнній відбудові нашої держави. Австрія. Вдячний пану канцлеру Негамеру за політичну і гуманітарну підтримку, за розуміння потреб України. Ми можемо дійсно зробити дуже багато для розвитку відносин між нашими державами. Словенія. Домовились з паном прем'єр-міністром Голубом, що можемо посилити співпрацю між нашими країнами. Подякував за послідовну підтримку кандидатства для України. Молдова. Говорив з пані президенткою Сандою. Взаємно підтримали одне одного напередодні важливого засідання Європейської Ради. І будемо допомагати одне одному швидше пройти цей шлях до Європейського Союзу. Сьогодні знову говорив з президентом Литви Гітанасом Науседою. Висловив йому повну підтримку у зв'язку з ситуацією навколо Калінінградської області Росії. Завтра продовжу такий марафон. Маємо забезпечити максимальну підтримку нашої державі. Ключове європейське рішення. Очікуємо. Очікуємо завтра. Надвечір. Окупанти били по Миколаєву. 7 ракет. На щастя, загиблих не було, 5 людей поранені. Були удари і на Харківщині. Є жертви. Обстрілювали прикордоння Чернігівської і Сумської областей. На Донбасі масовані авіаційні і артилерійські удари. Мета окупантів на цьому напрямку незмінна. Вони крок за кроком хочуть знищити весь Донбас. Весь. Лисичанськ, Слов'янськ, Краматорськ, будь-яке місто. Їм потрібно все зробити таким, як Маріуполь. Повністю розбитим. Ось чому ми знову і знову наголошуємо на прискоренні постачання зброї для України. Якнайшвидше потрібен паритет на полі бою, щоб зупинити цю д'явольську армаду і посунути її за кордони України. Я вдячний Сполученим Штатам Америки за допомогу і в розслідуванні воєнних злочинів на території України. Вдячний пану Елі Розенбауму за готовність приєднатися до встановлення справедливості. Він один з тих американських розслідувачів, кому вдалося викрити багатьох нацистів. Наша спільна слідча група має бути максимально сильною, щоб ніхто з російських злочинців не уникнув покарання. І це буде одним з найбільших у наш час внесків у захист міжнародного правопорядку, так само, як 1 вересня 1939 року і 22 червня 1941 року завершились Нюрнберзьким трибуналом. Має завершитись у справедливому трибуналі і 24 лютого 2022 року. Росія повинна відповідати за все зло, яке принесла Україні. Підписав сьогодні новий указ про нагородження наших героїв. Державними нагородами відзначено 195 учасників бойових дій, із них 17 посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, чиї життя забрали окупанти. Вічна слава кожному і кожній, хто воює за Україну. Готуємось до історичного рішення Європейської Ради. Залишаються лічені години до нього. Слава Україні!
Slava Ukraini. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky, and that rounds out our news segment for tonight on day 119. If you're here for the news alone, I thank you all so much for watching once again, and if you are new to this channel and did enjoy it, and you no longer want to stay around for the questions segment, please make sure to subscribe. As these streams do run every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day of the week except for Mondays. And we also run daily summaries, which are small 3-minute long videos that cover some of the highlight videos of the day in a very short and comprehensible video just a few hours before the stream runs. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. And we're now going to move on to our question segment. So make sure to stick around. If you did send in a live chat, we will answer every single one of those, and we will also try and answer some live chat questions as well after we cover all of the super chat questions. And so with that, what is our first question for the night, Matthew?
All right, and our first question for this segment goes to Uncle Tabbite, who puts in a $30 super chat and says, "Oh, Danny or Denny, the airline pilot, I tried donating to him too, but PayPal didn't allow it. Good content, and I hope he can fly in the future. But first, they got to kick out the invaders. Here's for the coffee and Spamaroo."
Well, thank you so much for the spam and the coffee. I always like to dip my spam in the coffee, honestly. It's delicious. But of course, I'm joking about that. That's just gross. But thank you so much for the support. And it is interesting to hear that Denis Davidov has a PayPal. I know that a lot of people are doing that, but I don't do that. And it's fine. I mean, like, I understand that it's a safe system, but still, at the same time, in my opinion, I feel like that opens up my channel to be I guess you could say, open to scams, where people could make similar accounts that look like mine and go around YouTube onto other streams and stuff like that and be like, hey, you know, if y'all enjoy my stuff, support my PayPal. And then they put out one that's very similar to mine, but not identical, and then people get scammed. And that's why I don't do that. That's why I always do it through the YouTube Super Chat system. And while YouTube does take 30% of the Super Chats, I still feel like it's a worthy price to pay, so that way my viewers can have assurance that everything I do is being operated through YouTube, and there's no way that there could be a potential scam going on. That's why I only give out my PayPal by request. Now, I do have a PayPal, but I don't make it public. I only make it I only let people know what my PayPal is if they ask for it directly over Discord or email. Although I want most people to contact me over Discord, because the email is supposed to be for business, and it's usually filled to the brim with spreadsheets and stuff, and then there'll be like a personal email there somewhere. So I hope that if y'all wanted to support me over PayPal, please reach out over Discord, but that's one thing that I don't do, and I hate to hear that as well, because it's always good to support everyone who is covering this war, because like Denny Davidov, which from all of y'all are saying is a former airline pilot from Ukraine, he is, of course, probably having a rough time financially. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. I thank you so much for enjoying our channel and making sure that we can have some more coffee and spam. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next question.
And I'm sure many of you just noticed we had a hell of an influx of bots there for just a minute. I have no idea where that came from, but I have eliminated most of them. And if you see any more, feel free to tag me as always, and I'll get rid of them as quick as I can. So up next, we have a $25 super chat from White Lightning 777. Yeah! And he does not leave a comment, so thank you very much for your support of the channel.
And I thank you once again, White Lightning. You've helped out this channel a lot, and you continue to do so. And I thank you so much because it helps our channel to keep running, and it helps us to keep on going. White Lightning 777, yeah! And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, "Good evening, Enforcers and Leaf Spring Army."
And good evening to you, Kaltenberg, of course. It's great to hear that you're back with us again, and you've been here every single night, and a true trooper at that. And so, thank you once again, and also, Slava Leaf Spring Army, and Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you so much once again, Kaltenberg, for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Duncan VR, who says, "Russia blames 2 Ukrainian drones for blowing up their oil refinery. I bet these are the ghost drones. What do you think? Spam, it's better than ham. Matthew loves it. No, he will never hear the end of the spam joke." And I see that Duncan is carrying on the spam legacy here. Matthew still hates spam, and it is not better than ham. I'll take ham any day over spam.
I think the spam's great, but we already settled that one a long time ago here on this channel, and sadly, most people disagree with me on that one, and you as well. So we're kind of in the same boat, but it's a small boat at that. But to answer that question, I think that those were not ghost drones. It appeared to have been a different kind of drone that the Ukrainians had in a pretty large supply before the war, and we did see it on film attacking that refinery. So in that aspect, it wasn't a ghost drone, but we did see one knock out a refinery today that did account for exactly 1% of Russia's national oil production. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. There's not really much to comment on that one. It's really just confirming or denying the report you heard. And I can confirm that at least one refinery was hit today by a drone, but it was not a ghost drone. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again to all of you, including you yourself, for supporting this channel, because without it, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running and keep on reporting the news. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, who says, "Night, night," and he says he is getting off for the night.
Oh man, well, I understand, BC. Of course, everyone out there has busy days ahead tomorrow, and so I wish you the best of dreams, the best sleep possible, because sleep is something that sometimes is very hard to come by. And so I completely understand if you have to get off for the night, and I hope you have a great night, and I hope you have enjoyed the news segment that we covered tonight. A lot of interesting news, and a lot of it as well. We had 41 different pieces of news to cover. So with that, thank you very much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and I hope you have a great night. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Michael Tichenuk, who says, "Well done."
And thank you so much, Michael, for enjoying what we do, and well done indeed, and thank you so much for the support. That is well done for sure. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment in a way, and thank you once again. It does help our channel to keep running, and so in that aspect, well done to you. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from D. Shaw, who says, "Do we have any numbers on Ukrainian casualties and equipment?"
We do not have those numbers. The Ukrainians usually keep that classified, and I don't think we've heard any numbers from the Russians. And of course, if we did, those numbers could be very well off. The Russians seem to be faking a lot of stuff video-wise, and so I'm sure statistically as well, they would be inflating those figures most likely by a factor of 3 or 2. So sadly, we don't have those kinds of figures. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one, because there's just not enough information to go off of to say how many casualties the Ukrainians have at this point. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hate I couldn't answer the question, but of course you are helping to keep this channel running with your support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, "The U.S. has pre-positioned assets on land and at sea The USMC used M60s in Desert Storm.
I do. Could you reread that one for me real quick so that way I can make sure to get the thought together?
Yes, Williams says the U.S. has pre-positioned assets on land and at sea. The USMC used M60s in Desert Storm.
That is true. They did use M60s in Desert Storm. The Marines are always stuck using, I guess you could say, the oldest stuff in the military. They were stuck using M1A1s while everyone else had moved. Well, the U.S. Army had moved on to the M1A2. So in that regard, they're always getting the short end of the stick. And yes, they were using those during the Gulf War, and I believe they were also using M551 Sheridans as well, which were an incredibly dated light tank at that point. But moving on from that and answering the first part, I hate to say this, Matthew, but for some reason that comment's slipping me tonight. Could you reread the first part for me again? That's not about the M60s.
So yes, the first part was the U.S. has pre-positioned assets on land and at sea.
That is true. I don't know if you're saying that about the M60s, but we usually do have forces all around the globe. Of course, that's why we have aircraft carriers, so that way we can always just have a floating air base somewhere in the world wherever we need one, or wherever we need multiples of them. The United States, I believe, has more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined. I don't know if that still holds up to this day, as a lot of the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers were decommissioned about a decade ago, but as far as I know, the United States still has more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined. So in that regard, I can entirely agree. And so I thank you so much for the support, William, and I hope that does address the comment. And of course, it's great to know that we have longtime viewers who are helping to support this channel and keep it running. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a super chat from Jose Diaz, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Gloria Ukrainia, love from Puerto Rico.
And also, Slava Ukraini, and thank you so much. It's really cool to hear you from Portugal. Wait a minute, no, not Portugal, sorry.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Golly, I don't know why that registered as Portugal in my mind. I was about to like, oh, are you from Porto or Lisbon? But of course, he's not from Portugal. He's from Puerto Rico, which is somewhere in the Gulf. Let me see if I can find it. Now, for some reason, Puerto Rico, there it is, Puerto Rico, right here. For some reason, that's like the hardest thing for me to ever find on the map. I can tell you where every single country is in the world except for Puerto Rico. But here it is right here. And I hope that everything's been going well. Of course, the mainstream news last time we heard about Puerto Rico was making massive news articles about how Puerto Rico had been thrown into the dark ages by the last hurricane that came through, and that it's in absolute disrepair and decay. But it seems that you do have electricity and internet because you are on here watching this stream. And so I hope that everything is okay in Puerto Rico, and I thank you so much once again for the support. I don't know what Puerto Rico's like, but considering that it is an island in the Caribbean, it must actually be pretty neat. And also, y'all have the Arecibo complex, I believe, if I remember the name correctly. It's the large relay that's somewhere in the mountains of Puerto Rico. And it was, of course, destroyed a while ago, but still, it is a really cool looking, I guess you could say, deep space antenna, if you'd like to call it. But of course, I thank you so much for the support, and also, Slava Ukraini. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Rockets Red Wines, who says, keep up the great work, Enforcer and Matt. I just finished 2 weeks of veteran PTSD therapy, and your jokes, while very similar to our dark vet humor, is an indication that 4 months of doing this could be impacting your health. And Rockets Red Wines, I will say that we actually know a vet that had PTSD, and seeing that effect firsthand is definitely a debilitating little illness there, and it's very sad to see in person. It's different just reading about it, but I will say that I don't think we're anywhere close to that point yet, but thank you for the concern.
I don't think it's having too much of an impact on my health. I usually try and pace myself as best as possible with this whole thing because, of course, it is a straining thing to do. Of course, I see some very graphic stuff. Matthew isn't really involved in that process of this whole entire thing. He's involved in the funner side, which is the merchandising and also just running the streams. But I am involved in watching, some pretty horrid stuff. But I don't feel like it's impacting me too much because, one, I had seen some stuff like that before the war, and two, it's, I try and not let it affect me too much because this is just a way of life. There is nasty stuff like that going on all around the world all the time. And so I just kind of kind of negate it in my mind, kind of like that. It's just something that happens. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I do thank you very much for being concerned about my health. But I can assure you that if it's not having an impact on my health, and even if it was, I feel like I have a dedication to make sure that I continue on this news, and so it would just keep on going regardless of what it would do to me. Because I made a promise, and I'm going to make sure to carry through on that promise the best I can. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also for caring for me. That was very nice of you, but I can assure you I am A-OK. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Diffuse56, who says, imagine if we gave out rifles from World War I like the Russians, you'd get an M1903 Springfield in 30-06. Not bad in a pinch, way better than a Mosin, even with iron sights, but that's just a thought.
Oh, it's not just a thought. That's just fact. You see, I've actually owned both a Mosin and a 1903. I actually own a 1903 right now. And I have to say, I've shot them both, and the 1903 is by far much better than a Mosin gun. The bolt is much smoother. The bolt also does not overheat and jam because of that. I do like the 30-06 round more than the 7.62 by 54. Of course, that's kind of like a splitting hairs thing, because they're very similar in size, the actual bullets themselves. But I just like it a lot more because it doesn't have a lip on it as well, and the lips can sometimes jam on each other in a Mosin if you don't stack them correctly. Honestly, I'm just a bigger fan of the 1903. And also the 1903's bolt is based off of the Mauser bolt, and the Mauser is a fairly competent rifle as well. And so, by and large, I would say that a 1903 is not a bad gun at all. In fact, it was so good that in World War I, there was actually a gun that the United States used differently in World War I, and a lot of people don't know this, but the 1903 was not the standard gun. It was actually the P14, the Pattern 14 rifle. And let me see if I can get this right here. And in American service, this rifle right here, it was called, pop quiz, it was called an M1917. And here's the M1917. And when you compare these side by side, they're identical. Crazy thing about it, right? The only difference is that it has this, I guess you could say, hand groove, where you can fit your fingers a little bit more comfortably. That's the only difference on the M1917. However, this is what most Americans were issued with. In fact, Sergeant York, if y'all have ever watched the old movie from 1940 about Sergeant York, he didn't shoot the Germans with a 1903 like he did in the movie. He actually shot them with a 1917. However, while this was the common gun in World War I, like I've been saying, however, about 3 times at this point, the 1903 was still the preferred gun. The 1903 is just so much better than this thing. Like, this thing, honestly, compared to the 1903 is garbage. And so whenever the American doughboys would see a 1903, regardless of what condition it was in, they could find a 1903 in a scrap pile, and they would drop the 1917 based off of first-hand accounts and run into the scrap pile headlong to grab that 1903 just because it's that much better. And that lets me know that the 1903 is a tried and true gun. Now, it wasn't the service rifle for long. It was the service rifle through World War I and the interwar period, and then around the 30s, the mid-30s, it started to get phased out by the M1 Garand, which was a great gun as well. But it was still used by the National Guard and other units through World War II, but not as much. And then it continued on its service in a very negated role. It wasn't as prevalent as it was in World War I and World War II, but it did serve all the way through to Vietnam in some form. It served in Vietnam as a sniper rifle at that point, but still, a bolt-action rifle is a bolt-action rifle at the end of the day, and the 1903s were fairly competent in their job. And we're looking at a 1917 just for y'all to know. And then here's a Pattern 14 Enfield, which is literally the same. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. I think that the 1903 is by far a much better gun than the Mosin gun. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Gary Robbins, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Gary, for your support of the channel. As always, very much appreciated. And let's see here. Moving on to our next one, we have an $18 super chat from Junebug72, who says, hello. Keep up the positive attitude and your passions. Thank you for being a bright spot in this sad mess. Have a good night. Slava Ukraine, and Hiram Slava.
Slava Ukraini. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And that's something that I like to do. There are a lot of channels out there that cover the Ukraine war, and I have had the ability every once in a while to go through and take a glancing look at some other channels that are covering this war. And for the sake of not trying to create any drama, I will not name names. But I have gone onto other channels, and the tone is always demure, and it's always very sad. And to the point, it's so sad that it's really hard to watch, just being honest. And so that's something that I'm always aware about, and that's why I always try and keep up a high pitch and bit of a chipper tone, because wars are very tough to cover, and the content itself will bring people down, and you don't want to make sure that your tone and also your delivery is also carrying that through as well, because then you're getting double down, and then that's even worse. And so I always want to make sure that my tone is light, and it is, of course, positive, because while it is a war, there are shining moments in it, there is good times, and it is just something that is, at the end of the day, kind of out of our control, and the only thing we can do is sit by and watch as it goes down. Of course, we can control it in some ways by contacting our representatives and doing such things like that, but by and large, the actual war and the situation on the ground is something we can't really change. So I don't ever want to make it sound all doom and gloom all the time, because there's really no reason to do that. So thank you so much for enjoying the way I cover the news and how I act during it, and I always try and make sure that it is something that's palatable to the common person, so that way it doesn't become too much. Because I know that if I was to have a demure tone and cover this in a serious way every single day like it was a funeral, I would lose my mind. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you once again for the kind words, and also helping this channel to go on longer. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a super chat from Lance Montgomery, who puts in a $17.76 donation. So that's pretty cool. Lance says, the Belarusian MOD announced a mobilization in the Homyol region bordering Ukraine. If Little Spoon Lukashenko attacks, which front, the Donbass or Kherson, will Ukraine have to draw from to respond?
They would most likely, considering it's a defensive war, I think they would most likely draw from the Kherson front, because it is a defensive war after all, and so they're most likely going to try and make sure that they can defend their ground more so than try and retake it. And so they would abandon an offensive here before they abandon a defensive here at Severodonetsk, because they've considered Severodonetsk a vitally important city. And while that's something they can lose, they've already lost Kherson. And so there's nothing to lose there if they were to abandon that offensive. The only thing they would be losing is potential, which is, arbitrary and kind of an abstract thing. So I think they would most likely pull, and of course, this is just my layman interpretation, so it could be wrong. We did get someone on Discord that went off, and, was talking about, he's wrong whenever I was saying, stuff, and then I would say it's an assumption. It's like, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it, but, it's like, it's still an opinion. I don't know where you're not getting that from. But anyways, I think they would draw from Kherson to answer that question the best I could. And also, if the Belarusians were to try and conduct anything, I honestly feel like they would not go straight for Kyiv. I feel like they would most likely move towards Lutsk. Because if they're able to cut the Ukrainians off from Poland, they pretty much cut them off from the majority of their supply routes heading west. The only direction they could go in from there would be Romania, which is cutting off a lot of their ability to import stuff from the outside world. So I feel like that would most likely be the direction that the Belarusians go in, and also, I feel like it's something the Ukrainians would not expect, considering that it's so far away, and, in the larger sense of things, it doesn't really look like there's a lot strategically available out here for the Belarusians to capture and make out to be a huge victory. But the border alone pretty much does that on its own. So with that, I hope that answers the question. And I thank you so much once again for the support. It does help our channel to keep on running, and I hope that that was a pretty good answer to that question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $35 donation from Anthony Buckley, who says, do we have any news in the last 3 months about Syrian mercenaries who were to go and support Russia?
No, we don't. We saw the video here on this channel as well, so we do know about it. But we've never seen them fighting on the front, and I think that may have been an entirely propaganda / morale thing to show, like, Bashar al-Assad is with us, and then they never went because we never got any evidence of it. So to answer that question, we did see the video of the supposed guys going over there, but we've never seen them fighting on the front since. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief, because there's not a lot to cover beyond that. We saw them heading over, and then they went into a black hole. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next, we have a $20 super chat from Eduardo Gonzalez, who says, what William meant to say is that the U.S. have maritime prepositioning ships, also known as MPS, 5 in each flotilla. Each ship has enough equipment that can support an entire Marine brigade with everything they need to go into combat for 30 days.
Well, I thank you very much for letting me know that, because that's something I did not know. And that's something that I'm very happy to say on this channel, is that I don't try and act like I know it all, and I'll just be honest, I did not know about those ships. That is pretty freaking cool. I don't think the Russians have anything comparable to that. Well, maybe they do. I mean, like the Orsk, it's pretty similar to that, I guess you could say, but still somewhat a smaller ship. But that is something that I did not know, and I thank you so much for providing that information to me, because that does make this a little different. That means that, you know, for example, if the Marines had to do anything, there is already readily available supplies that they can work off of for a whole month while they try and set up a more permanent supply line in the meantime. And so I thank you so much for the support and providing that information to us, because I didn't know about that at all. And so with that, thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $17 super chat from Not a Channel, who says, please treat yourselves to some good ham that does not come in a can. I suggest Black Forest for Enforcer Matt's sake at least.
Well, I thank you for the support, and I thank you for the ham fund. We now have a ham fund, and we will try that. Now, I like Spam, but I'm also not adverse to ham. And so if I ever had to get, you know, a rack of lamb or a piece of ham, I will always make sure to enjoy it, because I'm never one to turn down any kind of food. I think most food is pretty good, unless if you're trying out something like a black pudding. I did try that before, and I wasn't a big fan. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you very much once again for the support. I'll actually let Matthew cover that for a second, because I think he's the guy who is the ham man.
What do I know about ham?
You know all about ham. You don't like Spam, so you must like ham.
I like any type of ham. I'll take ham in a can, ham out of the deli. I don't care where it comes from. I would rather have anything except Spam.
Well, I just have to say, Matthew, that if you aren't a fan of Spam, you have to be a fan of ham. And so you have to pick one or the other, man. You've already not picked Spam. And so are you a fan of ham? I mean, obviously you're not saying that Spam and ham can coexist peacefully. You've already thrown that out the window.
Oh yeah, I'd rather have ham.
All right, that answers it. And with that, I thank you so much for the support for the ham fund, and we will make sure to try out some ham here in the near future. Now, so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Winston Segner, who says, greetings from California. Keep up the good work. Here's some party money for your party in the Commiplex when the war is over.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to have a party in the Commiplex. I think that, honestly, I'm not really a big fan of the whole rave nightclub kind of scene. I'm more of a fan of, if I had to have a party, a cocktail party, you know, something that's, like, nice, you know, and enjoyable. Anyone can enjoy a cocktail party, you know? So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to set up a party in the Commiplex. And I guess you could say that we're going to be having a block party, if you know what I mean, pun intended. Just for those of y'all who didn't catch on that joke, just to explain a little bit, the Commiplexes are also known as blocks, kind of like a prison cell. And so with that, I thank you for the support, and I hope that does address the comment and also address the party fun that we just got. And with that, we're on to the next question, and we've now opened up another fund.
And up on the next question, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, my dog approves this message. Slava Ukraine. And JK's dog is officially running for Congress now.
Really?
Oh, I made that part up.
Oh. Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that the dog is having a fun time. Of course, I'm a huge fan of dogs. I love dogs. I have 2 corgis, and I just love them to bits. I love to watch the silly little things do their crazy little antics. We actually have one named Sheba, and she does this thing that we describe as wumping, and that's where she like hops onto a couch and she like lays down on her side and she just jerks around and just goes wump wump wump, and it's funny. It's hilarious. But I do love dogs, and I do thank you very much for telling us a little bit about yours, at least the fact that it does exist. And so if you could share with us in the chat what kind of dog it is, hopefully Matthew could circle back to that and tell me. I would love to know what kind of a cute little dog you got. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I thank you for helping this channel to keep on going. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Ted Agens, or Agens, I'm not sure how to say it, who says, hey, what's up with the red area west of Melitopol?
Great question. The red area west of Melitopol, well, east of Melitopol, or west of Mariupol, is the Partisan-controlled area that we really don't know a lot about. We don't know how big this area is. We're assuming it's this big. There's not a lot of information on it. It may be larger, or it may be a lot smaller. But we do know that there's a heavy presence of partisans here in this area, and that's what that red little block represents. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. It's kind of a brief answer. I'll just include that here on the legend. Let's see, red field near Mariupol represents partisan activity. You know, maybe they can get some bipartisan activity down there soon. But anyways, thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, green eggs and spam, I am.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and ham, spam, and green eggs and ham. I just rhymed ham with ham. You know, that makes me sound really dumb, but I do thank you very much for the support. And also the Dr. Seuss rhyme. It is getting very Dr. Seussy up in here, and you know, that's very sussy, if you ask me, making as many puns as I can in one go. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And so with that, Matthew, if you would like to add on to that green eggs and spam comment, I'll let you. And if you don't have anything to add, we'll just move on to the next question.
And I think I'll leave the rhyming at that and move on to the next super chat, which is from Susan R. Hadley, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, next fundraiser, we should raise money to replace that drone, eh? Glory to Ukraine.
Well, I guess you're Canadian, eh? And I don't think we'll be able, sadly. I have seen a lot of requests for this, and I understand that it's a really cool one to do. But sadly, I don't know of any nonprofits that I can run through the YouTube Give program that would be able to raise money for a drone of any kind. And I hate to say that, but I am limited by the YouTube system. And I'll try and explain here why, because maybe no one's heard this in a while. YouTube, and the way I run the fundraisers where they actually show up on the stream, is run through a system on YouTube called YouTube Give. And YouTube Give is operated completely by YouTube. They cover 100% of the fundraising fees, and they also operate a little account where people can send in money, and they manage it and then send it out to the nonprofit that's selected. It's an incredible system that removes a lot of the hassle from the process for me, which would have made it impossible otherwise. But the downside to it is that I have to pick my fundraisers through this system called the GuideStar program. And the GuideStar program is an online database of nonprofits that have been approved by YouTube that we can run fundraisers for. And so that's why I've usually been relegated to stuff like the UNHCR or the American Red Cross or something like that, because those are actually registered under GuideStar. But other ones, like, you know, like Come Back Alive and stuff like that, they're not approved under the GuideStar system. So sadly, I can't actually cover that kind of stuff because, you know, of course, it's going to be pretty tough. Because I can't do it through YouTube, and then I would have to do it through another system. And if I actually set up a personal fundraiser myself and then ask people to donate to that, the paperwork would be monstrous, to the point I would probably have to stop streaming to just try and make sure to manage the paperwork surrounding a single fundraiser. So with that, sadly, I don't think we'd be able to actually raise funds for a drone, but I would love to do that myself. And so with that, We're going to move on to the next question. And I thank you so much for the support. And sadly, we just wouldn't be able to do that. But I do understand where y'all are coming from. And I hope there is a fundraiser out there where funds can be raised for drones. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And just so everybody knows, it looks like we have about 10 super chats left. So moving on to our next one, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen again, who says, some of the World War II vets that I interviewed talked about how local dogs would alert at night to possible intruders. A couple of accounts I recorded were how the dogs saved their lives and they made great pets.
I have heard about that before, and in World War I, it was common often for American units to pick up a dog over there. Whether they make it out alive or not is another question. You know, the trenches were a very dangerous place for everyone. But yes, dogs are very common in war, and they've been common since the dawn of time. If y'all remember a lot of stories from Britain, for a lot of my British and also viewers who have British ancestry and have been very interested in it and the stories of, you know, your ancestors. There are a lot of stories in Britain about kings and such who would take dogs with them to war, and of course there's the famous thing in Britain with warhounds, and that was also a very Germanic thing as well that the Anglos brought over with them to Britain when, you know, of course they kind of committed genocide against the Celtic Britons. But with that, I hope that does address the question, well, the comment in a way. And of course, it is a very interesting little tidbit of history about how dogs have always been man's best friend, even in the most dangerous of places like a war. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and thank you once again for the nice little story there. And also, I bet it was a lot of fun to talk to World War II vets. I had the fortune of talking to a couple in my family. One of them actually landed in the third wave on I believe it was Omaha Beach on D-Day. And he actually managed to get 2 Purple Hearts and serve all the way through the war. And he ended up, at the very end of the war, in the suburbs of Germany, just 25 miles away from the city, from what he said. Now, I don't know about that, because I was thinking, I was like, wow, did the Americans ever get that close? And as far as I can tell, they may have. But, of course, he also wasn't in the group that met the Russians at the Elbe River. So apparently, you know, that pretty much stands for what it is. But still, interesting story on his part. And I remember a couple of his stories, you know, he said the bodies stank. I don't know if that's the proper tense for stink, but the bodies were stinking in the streets, you know, of all the dead Germans that had been killed around the place. And he also remembers one time when hundreds of B-17s in a formation flew over their heads, and he said they were so high up, but there were so many of them, that the ground was shaking below his feet, and it was the loudest, most impressive and awesome thing that he had ever seen, seeing just this conglomeration of planes all in one spot, and the raw power from them was enough to shake the earth thousands of feet below him. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment, address the comment. Also give a little bit of story about myself and some of my previous history. And that's the kind of people I grew up around. We're veterans mostly, but most of them weren't from World War II. Most of them were from Korea, Vietnam, and onwards. But with that, thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Easty Chuck, who says, I live in Estonia. Why do so many Americans believe Russian propaganda? They don't realize that Russia attacked Ukraine, ?
A lot of Americans believe Russian propaganda, and of course, not getting political here, I'm just going to put that out there. But a lot of people believe Russian propaganda on both sides, actually, and I want to make that clear before I go into this, because this is something that affects both sides of, you know, the political spectrum, I guess you could say. But they believe that the Russians were right because American politics have gotten so extreme on both sides when you go far enough that they become detached from reality, and they think that the entire world revolves around the American political parties. You know, like both sides, when you go far enough in both directions, believe that the Russians are actually the saviors, and they're trying to point out the corruption in the other party here in the United States. Which is so stupid. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense if you were to go with party A or party B there and say, oh yeah, Russia went to war to try and root out the corruption in party A or party B. Because that would be like saying Hitler invaded Poland to try and point out the corruption in the British Parliament. Like, what type of reasoning for war is that? It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of Americans just There's a lot of Americans over here that believe silly stuff. A lot of people believe the earth is flat. A lot of people believe that a whole bunch of silly stuff, honestly, that's just certainly untrue. But they just believe it anyways. I don't know. Maybe they're bored, and they just want to feel different. There's a lot of people in America who just want to be different to the point that they'll just pick nonsensical stuff to try and be different. That's one thing that I run into a lot is that you'll be like, I honestly like, cars. You could say that, and then there's going to be that person, I like steampunk cars, and you're like, there's no such thing. Like, why do you like that? Well, I want one. You're like, why? And they're literally just doing it really to be different. And that's one thing that you run into here in the United States, and that's why you can get crazy things. Also, on top of that, like people believing in lizard people and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people believe in lizard people. A lot of people think that the queen is a lizard person who eats unborn kids or something like that. But people in America just believe in crazy things. But that's just kind of what you get when dealing with society. There's always going to be the fringes in both directions. Whether you go crazy one way or another, that kind of believe in the crazier stuff. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And also another little thing to kind of go a little bit more in depth here. The world, and this is of course just a little bit of an interjection in my opinion, but the world is an incredibly simple place. It's so simple that most people miss it for the trees whenever they look at anything. And usually things can be seen at surface value and they are what they are. There's a very rare exception where it's not. Like with Russia going to war in Ukraine, the explanations have been obvious. When Germany went to war with Poland and invaded Poland and also annexed the Sudetenland and also the Czech Republic as a whole and also committed the Anschluss against Austria, their aims were clear and obvious, and there was nothing extra to it. That's what they were. Whenever you see political moves in the government, not touching on the parties and who's right and who's wrong and all, but whenever you see a political movement from either party in the government, usually what you're seeing is not in some kind of grand conspiracy theory. Of course, in the United States, touching on both parties think that the other one's out to destroy the other half of the country and kill them. But the truth is that both parties believe that they are doing what's best for the country and what's going to help everyone out. And then the other party, of course, believes that the other one's trying to kill them in the process, which is insane to me. But still, it's very surface level, and there's no kind of a grand conspiracy theory out there where all the leaders of the world gather in a group and start planning out what they're going to do. There's none of that. Like if you've ever tried to work in a group with anyone, you'll find out how quickly it falls apart and how disorganized everything is. And I can tell you, and also a lot of things get out, like with what you're doing. And so, going off of that and my limited experience with working in groups, I can certainly tell you that if there was some massive world organization of leaders that were trying to do something as like an example of a crazy conspiracy theory, we would have known about that a long time ago, and there's really no concrete proof of that. And I'm sure there's about to be someone in the live chat that's just, that's Orange Grove, or Aloe Grove or whatever it is in California, or the hill in Hungary or whatever, But anyways, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen once again. And thank you, William, for your continued support as always. It's absolutely tremendous. And William says, pre-positioned assets can be used and be replenished later. Therefore, the U.S. can provide lots of stuff out of that inventory that exists to meet the Ukrainian needs from munitions to heavy weapons.
I believe that is true. And the United States does have a massive stockpile of weapons readily available at its disposal. That's something that the United States is known for. In fact, it has money to burn at its disposal. The U.S. military has a budget of $700 billion a year, which is just unbelievable. So I do entirely believe that you are correct, William, in saying that the United States has a lot of supplies to supply the Ukrainians with. And if we ever had to get involved in Eastern Europe, we would certainly be able to run for a pretty long while without ever having to consider about pulling back to try and conserve supplies. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support and also airing that statement, because I think it's a pretty good one and a pretty true one at that. And so with that, thank you once again, William, for being a longtime supporter and also dropping down little nuggets of good information and truth like that here and there. And with that, thank you once again, and we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have another super chat from William Allen, and he puts in another $10 donation and says, IOW, the pace of logistics is speeding up if they are provided to Ukraine. By the way, first rifle I shot was the 1903.
Now, I know that since that was the first one you shot, hopefully it wasn't sporterized. I don't know if you can sporterize a 1903, but then you and me can agree the 1903 is a pretty nice gun. I'm a big fan of it and also use it for reenacting, which is why I got one. But to answer the first part of that question about logistics, could you reread that for me, Matthew? Because I think I may have missed out on the first part.
He says, IOW, the pace of logistics is speeded up if they are provided to Ukraine. By the way, first rifle I shot was the 1903.
So I think you were talking about that whole entire discussion I had about the timetable that the U.S. is looking at to send anything over. And that may be true. But at the same time, I'm not really sure because we see that the United States will say we're sending something over and then it takes weeks for it to get there. And so it may be operating off of that airline timetable I gave, but it could also be working on an expedited timetable as well. And so you may be right in that category. And once again, when I said all that, I may have been wrong. That's something that I'm always willing to say because that's just based off of my knowledge and what I think would most likely be the most logical way to do something. But it could be wrong. So I think that you may have a point there. Hopefully we can get a little discussion here in the live chat about that and see what everyone thinks, because I think that that's actually a pretty interesting topic to say. Are the Ukrainians getting expedited support to them that arrives quicker than normal, or is the United States working at a normal space and just filling in the schedule whenever it's available to send the stuff over? So with that, I thank you so much for the support and bringing that up. That's a pretty good point to consider as well. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next, we have a super chat from NOYDB, who puts an $8 donation and says, Other saw my finding the Ukraine Post Office online store, good prices, and can donate to the troops, can get the warship stamps and shirts, hats, etc. Chrome would translate Ukraine something they deliver.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I think that's, of course, really cool. But, of course, I think everyone knows my stance that I'm not really big into Ukrainian merch because, of course, we've marketed jokes here on this channel. Now, we've done that. But I have never put a Ukrainian flag on any of our merchandise or anything like that just because I believe it's kind of a war profiteering in a way and trying to profiteer off of Ukraine's, success. So I have never done that. I don't know if that's a private company that's saying they do that. And if so, if they're saying that they're actually donating a certain amount, I guess that's great. But I would honestly want to buy stuff that has Ukrainian symbolism on it from a Ukrainian government institution instead of a website like that, just in my opinion though. But of course, if y'all would like to get some Ukrainian merch, it does sound like a pretty neat place, so go check it out if y'all would like. But that's kind of my opinion on like Ukrainian symbolism on like merchandise and stuff. So with that, I thank you very much once again for the support, and I hope that does weigh in on the comment. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Martin Van Own, who says, "Send more, please."
Send more is in our channel, or what? What do you take that as, Matthew?
I'm not really sure. I think he might have meant something about support to Ukraine, but I'm just sort of guessing on that one.
Well, if you're talking in the context of sending more stuff like the United States to Ukraine, I can, of course, agree with that. That's something that I highly support here on this channel, and I do believe that the Ukrainians should get as much support as we possibly can give them right now. The more readily we are able to provide support in a higher number, the better the Ukrainians are off, because we're directly competing against the Russian military machine and how fast it can supply itself, which is, right now it seems to be fairly low. And so if we can give the Ukrainians an upper hand while the Russians are on their low, that means that the Ukrainians will be able to push them back. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are going to move on to the next one, and I thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $7 super chat from Roman's Life, who says, "I finally managed to catch your live stream. I am from New Zealand. I wanted to say Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, you both do an amazing job. I've been watching the replays since probably around day 13. And thank you very much for the kind words, Romans, and I'm going to let the enforcer take it from here.
And I thank you very much once again for the kind words, like Matthew said, because that's really cool to hear. We have a lot of viewers from both Australia and New Zealand, which is the most bizarre thing because honestly, those are about the last two countries I would ever expect to watch these streams, just because their populations are considerably small, yet it seems like a large amount of our viewers are from Australia and New Zealand, and that's really cool to know that we have a lot of support down there, and a lot of y'all enjoy these streams and watch them, but of course it's an odd time of day for y'all sometimes, so y'all just watch them in replays. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and all of the kind words. And it is cool to hear that you've been watching these on replay since day 13. That's insane to me. And of course, I'm very glad that you have found a reliable source of news to the point that you've been watching this for 113 straight days. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and also all those kind words. It really is humbling to me to think that people do enjoy this channel that much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Slim Booter, who says, any update on the Black/Baltic Sea?
We haven't gotten any updates so far. It appears that the Turks are not allowing any navies from any country to pass through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea. Right now, it looks like the Black Sea Fleet has pulled off from the coast. We haven't heard of any more naval ships being destroyed rather than a tug, and I believe a support ship that was heading to Snake Island. Beyond that, we haven't heard anything else rather than that. And so right now we haven't gotten any updates on the Black Sea or the situation pertaining to it, and the blockade still stands. The Russians are still blockading, excuse me, goodness, the Russians are still blockading Western access, well really worldwide access, to both the ports of Odessa and Mykolaiv. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much once again for the support. Naval news is very hard to come by here on this channel, and we try to cover it the best we can, but there's just so little of it. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Anthony, and bear with me, I'm going to try to pronounce this. He says, is Snehervika still occupied by the Russians? And I'm going to put that in the comments, so that way Andrew can see that, or the enforcer, I mean.
Got you. I'll try and type that in. Let's get that right there. Copy. And then let's throw that up here. Oh, look at the little corgi. Very precious. Anyways, let's type in that down. Let's see. Sneherivka. Steady in Ukraine. Of course. Let's see here. Where is this? It looks like it'd be near Kherson. Yes, it is. I believe, as last I heard, and let me check my map here to find out. According to my map, which may be off a little bit, I'll give it that. In this area, the information has been a little hard to come by, and so it's a rough approximation. But I have it under Ukrainian control. So right now, as far as I know, the village has been liberated. But that's based off of my map. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will, because this area is kind of an enigma for me because I don't get enough information to actually adjust it well enough. But with that, I thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief, because on my map, it is under Ukrainian control. And with that, we're on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Tim Q, who says, keep up the good job, enforcers.
And I thank you so much, Tim, for wanting us to keep up a good job. And I promise you that we will be keeping up this kind of job as long as we can, and as long as we're able to get support from our viewers that make sure that we're able to keep on doing this as our primary job. And so thank you once again for the support, and we will make sure to try and keep up this quality. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from OCB, who says, have you seen these two documentaries? The first one is Winter on Fire, Ukraine's Fight for Freedom, and the second one is Ukraine on Fire. Can you comment on them if you have?
Sadly, oh man, I hate to say this, I haven't seen those. I'm going to have to say this again. I have to say this whenever I haven't seen anything. I don't have a lot of time, and usually when I did have a lot of time, I spent it usually playing games. And when I say games, I don't think they're the games that people imagine, you know, like Battlefield or Call of Duty. I've honestly found those to be really annoying to play. I usually played stuff that was kind of a little boring. It was honestly like looking at a spreadsheet. I used to play a lot of Hearts of Iron 4 for some of my hardcore strategy gamers. Y'all may remember this as the strategy game from World War II, where you could select a country and just play it out. And so, really honestly, the games I used to play were like nation management and stuff like that. So sadly, I haven't watched those documentaries before the war or during the war. And before the war, it was because I just never watched anything like that. And during the war, I've just never really had the time, sadly. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And of course, I would love to watch them, but due to time constraints, I most likely wouldn't be able to. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one, and I thank you so much for the support once again.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from NOYDB, who says, please enjoy one order of small French fries, and please share one boiled egg. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for the support, and we will make sure to enjoy a small fry and one boiled egg. Speaking of which, I went out and finally had to get a new tank of gas recently, and the gas in my area is $5.50 a gallon, and it was expensive. Oh god, it was terrible. But I thank you very much for supporting us with a small fry. And honestly, at this point, I appreciate so much that people set up a gas fund earlier on in the war for me. You know, like everyone would be sending in, here's something for gas money, because now gas is just literally killing me. It's incredibly expensive these days, and I hope that the government can find a way to try and lower those prices, regardless of how they do it, whether however they're able to find an effective solution to it. Hopefully those prices can go down, because I know that everyone in the country must be suffering because of these incredibly high prices. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you very much once again for the support and also the small fry and boiled egg fund. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, let me give a shout out to Zach Jeffers and CC for putting in a $2 donation each, but without a comment. So, thank you very much, Zach and C, for your donation to the channel. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next one, which is from Junebug, who puts in a $2 donation and says, toward your kneecaps cause of YouTube.
What?
I believe Junebug is talking about YouTube when they come down here and bust our kneecaps. That is to be put toward the fund.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to of course have to start probably like a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe for that one, because I think kneecap replacements are going to be pretty steep. And I think that tonight we may finally cross that threshold where YouTube's going to come down here and bust our knees out. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Junebug. It does mean a lot, and you've been around forever, and I'm so glad that you have enjoyed these streams and have continued to watch them through and through. So thank you once again, and I thank you so much for caring for our knees and their future. And with that, we're on to the next question, and I thank you once again.
And we have a $2 super chat from Big Dog CNC, who says, add the Javelin song, same music, and he sent me the video ID.
I think it will do that. We'll most likely replace the song at the very start. That sounds kind of like a light rock song, because that one's actually copyrighted. I checked it before I put it on there, and it said it wasn't copyrighted, and then I got copyrighted last night for it. And then I got copyrighted today for it as well, I think. So I will have to switch that one out tomorrow, and hopefully that one can work. And so thank you very much once again for the support. Hopefully Matthew can shoot that over to me right now or after the stream. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from William Allen, who says, I guess you never played Risk.
William, I have never played many board games. Sadly, I grew up in a world where the board game had died, you know, because the first game I played ever was Monopoly, and I was a really little kid when I played that. And of course, it is the epitome of family fights and squabbles. I don't think anyone's ever had a fun time playing Monopoly. It just creates huge cussing matches, at least from what I know. And I was a little kid then, and everyone was getting violent, including me and Matthew playing that game. Monopoly is the bane of society, I tell you. But I would say that the closest I ever got to playing Risk, that's a tough one. The first game, just sadly, I can't even say how close I got to playing Risk. I know about the game and how it's played. but the closest I ever got to playing Risk was the first game I've ever played, and it was Napoleon Total War. Just for y'all to know, I grew up kind of an odd childhood. I didn't really listen to a lot of music, and so the soundtrack of this game, Napoleon Total War, really defined my music tastes from here on. And I still kind of listen to music that falls under the category of Napoleon Total War's soundtrack to this day. And honestly, I think it was the best soundtrack ever made for a game. But this is a screenshot from inside the game. It's kind of a strategy game like Risk, but at the same time, it's a real-time strategy game where you can pit armies against armies. It was kind of small in scale, like you could only have about 2,000 soldiers on the field, 1,000 soldiers on one side, 1,000 on the other, when the real-life battles would have hundreds of thousands of men on the field. But still, it was a really good game to start off at, especially as a kid. Like, I was like 10 years old when I first played this game in 2012, and it was really fun. I love this game. It still has a place in my heart, and I still play it to this day every once in a while. And so with that, sadly, I never played Risk, but I played some stuff very close to it, and this would be something that I would describe as, while very abstractly different from it, is still somewhat close in nature. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much once again for the support, William, and I thank you very much for letting me bring up a little bit of my gaming passions, because I really do enjoy the big strategy games. I love to think of how to... well, not really just war games. I also like just basic governance and city building games, because I always like to imagine how one could make a nation or a city prosper beyond belief. That's something that I always think is incredibly cool to look into. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next super chat is from NOYDB, who puts in a $7 donation and says, I have to make it clear that website I provided to you is the actual Ukrainian post office. Again, great deals, deliver everywhere, and you can donate to many Ukrainian causes, including the army.
All right. Now, I'm sorry that I misunderstood that there. I thought you were talking about a private website here in the United States. If it's the Ukrainian post office, then I highly recommend that everyone runs over there and checks that out. In fact, we'll pull it up on stream. Ukrainian post office store. Ukroposta. Hopefully I pronounced that correct. Let's see. Prices. Philateli. What's that? Special postal stamps. Hopefully this is the direction we need to go in. These look like the kind of ink stamps that you'd pat down on something. Maybe they have the actual stamps. Online shop. Maybe that's where we'll find it. Yes, here we go. And they look cheap. They look really cheap, actually. Let's switch this to English. Russian warship. Does it actually say the whole thing? Wow. Andy, I don't know if you can see this on your screen, but it literally says in translation, sheet, Russian warship, ... everything, death to enemies. I like that.
Oh my goodness.
That's actually pretty good. And it's 69 hryvnia, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm not really sure. Don't hold me to that one. But really cool little stamp. I like these stamps, and I may get some. So now that we found this, and I found a way to get here, they also have shirts as well. Hats, mugs. Look, it's our merch store, Matthew. They opened up their very own merch store.
I wish I could see it, but it's quite a delay on my end.
Ah, man. Let me screen share real quick. Let's share the screen. Post market. You should be able to see it there.
Aha, yeah, yeah, that does
it's
look like
our merch store. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that. We may have to go on here and support Ukraine through merch sales. And you know, I wonder if Zelensky, if he ran live streams, if he would say the same things I say, like, you know, we rely on the tax dollars and also the merchandise store to keep the war running. But with that, really cool to see, and I thank you so much for clarifying that for us, because I didn't actually know you were talking about the Ukrainian post office itself. And so thank you once again for the support and also letting us know about that. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mike P, who says, do you think the shot down drone was the Polish fly eye?
I don't I don't know. I don't know a lot about different kinds of drones. I wish I knew about everything in the world, but sadly, drones are one of the things that I don't know much about because they're just new and they haven't been around long enough for me to kind of like drill it into my head what kind's what. So sadly, I couldn't really tell you, and I'd have to declare ignorance on that one due to a lack of knowledge on my end. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that the support it can help this channel keep going, and I hate that I couldn't really answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And the final super chat question of the night goes to Presidential Luke, who puts in a $2 donation and says, very aggressively, "What do you mean? What does partisan area mean?" Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark.
Well, what does it mean? And I knew you were going to say it. I don't know if that's a joke or not, but I will explain it really quick since I did say something like that earlier in the stream. I think you may be joking. But just in case, I will answer this again. Partisan activity is when civilians behind enemy lines say, we're kind of pissed with this and we don't really like it, so we're going to fight back against them. And they start to commit guerrilla activities against the occupiers. And so this area is representative of where we know a heavy amount of that kind of activity is happening. And so that's what it is. And so I hope that answers the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we've reached the end of the super chats for the night. We have not put a cutoff, so we will answer more super chats as they come in. But for now, we're going to answer as many live questions as we can, and then afterwards we will round out the stream. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up first from the live chat, we have a question from Gus Pritchett, who says, "I've heard about Russia invaded NATO airspace, and Russia is wanting to pick a fight with NATO because of that. And can you confirm?"
Yes, the specific airspace you're talking about is Lithuania's. They violated Lithuania's airspace and caused a little bit of a political row, but I don't think it'll go further than that. They, of course, did that earlier on in the war to both Finland and Sweden, I believe, where the heads of state there were actually run to shelter, and the aircraft were scrambled to intercept the Russians because they had, of course, violated the airspace there. So this is something that the Russians have been doing regularly during the war, and I don't think it'll lead to much, but it was a huge political debacle there yesterday and into today as well. And so I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and we had another super chat come in from Presidential Luke, who clarifies his last one. He says, "What did you mean by the partisan area near Mariupol?"
That's just where partisan activity is occurring to a higher degree than everywhere else. It seems that this is like the land of partisans here, and they're fighting against the Russians, as far as we know, heavily amongst these groups of villages here. But then again, this area could be much larger, or it could be much smaller, or it may not even exist, and partisan activity is just sporadically occurring throughout all of the occupied areas. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're now going to move on to the live chat questions again.
All right, and back to the live chat, we have a question from the Beezer, who says, "How does a drone make it into Russian air without being tagged as hostile? Do they not report current friendly drone flight to each other?"
That's something that may have actually happened, what you're suggesting right there. You've got to remember that near the fall of the Soviet Union, a kid from West Germany took off in a Cessna and flew it all the way from West Germany. Wait a minute, correction. No, I think he may have like flown it to Finland first, and then he flew it from Finland all the way through Russia to Moscow and landed the Cessna in Red Square. And so you've got to remember that the Russians, of course, have had a lot of problems with incompetence, and I think that that drone just may have made it through. And if y'all want to hear about that story in its full detail, there are YouTube videos about it, so just pull it up and you should be able to find it. But by and large, I think that the Russians may have just been incompetent and may have picked up that drone multiple times on radar and just went, it's probably ours, or something like that, and then it just kept on reaching its target closer and closer and closer until it finally got there and just rammed into it. So I think that most likely was what happened, and I think that you are hitting on the nail there and saying that the Russians probably aren't tracking all of their flights well enough to actually pick up when there's an enemy drone just flying amongst the midst of them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. Well, not the support, but the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a live chat question from Bobo Uzala, who says, "Enforcer, where is Starsky?"
Starsky was given a break on this Sunday. We, of course, are still talking to him every once in a while. It has been very busy, so I haven't been able to talk to him much. But we are talking to him every once in a while, and he most likely will be on in the future. It's just that we were giving him a break last Sunday because Starsky, like everyone else, is of course getting a little tired, and we are trying to make sure that he does get breaks, at least as far as we can control on our end. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Ukraine F. Putin, who says, why has Russia's Air Force failed to dominate Ukraine?
That's a great question, and the answer is that Ukraine's air defenses remained intact after the initial Russian attacks on their air defenses on the 24th. You see, the Russian information that they used on the 24th was actually incredibly dated. And so, instead of attacking the modern air defense units that the Ukrainians have, they actually attacked the older air defenses that the Ukrainians had from the 80s. And so they knocked out the least capable stuff in the Ukrainian arsenal, while then the most modern stuff remained intact. And so, based off of that, and also the valiance of the Ukrainian Air Force itself, the skies over Ukraine were contested during the early month of the war, and as the war continued to progress, the Ukrainians were able to contest the airspace well enough that they pretty much control it over most of Ukraine, and Russian aircraft can't really fly anywhere without running the risk of being shot down nearly immediately. And that's why the Russians haven't been able to gain air supremacy, is just because of the strength of Ukrainian ground air defenses, as well as the perseverance of the Ukrainian Air Force in the onset of the war. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, why doesn't Ukraine shut off or destroy the Russian oil and gas pipelines that run through Ukraine? It is in Ukraine's interest.
That is an excellent question. We actually asked Starsky that question last time he was on, and we don't even know if those pipelines are still running. There's not a lot of information about them, and so unfortunately, I can't really even tell you if they are running in the first place to be able to attack. And I can't really get into the reasons why they're not being attacked if they are still running, because no reasons have been given. And also another thing is that they may not be destroying them because of the ecological harm they may cause. The Russians, of course, are pumping the oil from Russia to the west, and if the Ukrainians were to go and say break the thing or anything like that, that means that oil is just going to start pouring out of it by the tens of thousands of gallons a day, most likely. And then the Ukrainians are going to be stuck with a massive disaster as oil just continues to seep out over the land and pretty much kill everything that it touches. So I think that may be another reason why they're not doing that, because if they did that, they would almost be like cutting off their own nose to spite their face, because it would cause more harm to Ukrainian lands than it would anything else. And the Russians could just continue to pump the oil and demand payment from the Poles or wherever this oil is going to, because it was supposed to make it there, and then the Ukrainians will end up with an ecological disaster on their hands. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. Of course, that's just my assumption, and that's a pretty big one because we don't have a lot of information about those pipelines. And with that, we're going to move on to answer 3 more questions from the chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And up next, we have a live chat question from Bill G, who says, does anyone know the fate of the Ukraine army units who surrendered in Mariupol along with the Azov forces?
We do. We know that all of those units apparently, of course, surrendered, and then they were moved to prisoner of war camps inside of the DPR. We know of a large one at Olenivka, and beyond that, we don't really know anything else. Of course, the information is largely kept secret by the Russians, but we do know that the majority of them, if not all of them, have wound up in prisoner of war camps in the DPR. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for asking. That was a really good question, and that's about all the information we actually have on that, as far as we know. And so with that, we're going to move on to our second to last question.
And next, we have another question from Olivia McCarthy, who says, Enforcer, with Russia going into Estonia's airspace and the tensions with Lithuania due to Russia is at the brink of doing something stupid, ?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's the brink of doing something stupid. I think the Russians did something stupid there for sure, but I don't think it's the brink of stupidity. I've thought that the brink of stupidity at the start of the war was when the Russians said they would also invade Finland as well. I thought that was peak stupidity. And also, I thought it was real peak stupidity when they were starting to threaten the West outright with open war or nuclear war over minor trivial things. And so I hope that answers the question. I don't think this is the stupidest thing they've done, and I don't think that this is going to lead into World War III, although I could be wrong on that one, because that's entirely an opinion. It could be leading to war any minute, or it may not ever lead to war. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. And we're now on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in a question?
So the lucky last viewer of the night is Alan Parson, and he put in a question that inspired a poll earlier, which many of you responded to. And the question was, what would you prefer if you had to go into battle? You have to pick between the AK platform, or the AR platform. And earlier, many viewers said they would rather have the AR platform, and a lot of you thought that the AK platform was hot garbage, and I would have to tend to agree with that. I would certainly rather go into battle with the AR platform, and now it is time for the Enforcer to weigh in on that one.
I'm a big fan of both of them. I've actually shot both of them in full auto. So I've actually shot the M4, and I've also shot the AK-47. No, I'm sorry, correction. It was the AKM, and I've also shot the AK-74. While that's in mind, while that being said, I would say that if I actually had to pick one, although they really operate the same when you're shooting them, they have about the same recoil, they feel the same. Well, specifically the AK-74 and the M4 feel the same because they're using a very similar caliber. I would still pick the M4 just because I trust it more. The United States, of course, makes things to a higher quality by default, and the AK, while shooting it, it did feel like it had a lot of rattling pieces on it. It felt like a piece of garbage, honestly, but still, it shot about the same as an M4, at least when I was shooting it. So I would still pick the M4 over the AK, just because I'm an M4 fan, and I think that the Americans make the best weapons, and I think that goes all the way back, once again, to the 1903 versus the Mosin Nagant. Which one's better? The 1903, at least in my opinion. And so I would still pick the M4, or the AR as everyone's calling it here, over the AK, just because I think it's a better make, and also a better weapon all around. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. And we have now reached the end of tonight's stream. I see that we have one more super chat in, and so if you would like to cover that, Matthew, we will cover that one real quick.
So the last super chat goes to NOYDB, who puts in another $2 donation and says, "This is for one more egg."
And I thank you so much for the egg, and that is a perfect way to end tonight's stream. And so while I eat this imaginary egg, I thank you all so much for watching once again. It has been a wonderful thing to, of course, cover the news for everyone again, and I'm glad that everyone has enjoyed it and have found it informational. Of course, if you have been watching the stream and you are new to this channel, then you must be a trooper, and we run these streams every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day of the week except for Mondays, and we also upload short summary videos as well, about 3 minutes long, that are uploaded every single day of the week except for Mondays as well. So I hope that you do subscribe and you do enjoy being a member of this Leaf Spring Army, which is the name of our little community, and I hope that you will be back soon. And to the rest of all of my wonderful viewers, Leaf Spring Army veterans that have been around forever, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the day 120 news, which will be the beginning of month 5 of the war. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all around in the next one. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe and take care.